we're gonna call the meeting to order. We've got one more council member here to come, just finishing up for dinner.
At least you guys ate.
Yeah, true that. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and we'll get going here as soon as we can. Yeah, call the meeting to order, the approval of the agenda. Does anybody, any items we have?
We do, we've got a few late items, we have 3 letters in relation to item 3.3 of the agenda, which is regarding September Morn Beach access, and then we have item 5.3 regarding update on Blue Water Park and King River Bay Water System, and then an additional letter, 5.3B, regarding King River Bay and Blue Water Park as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Oh,
And are these on the table?
no, they're on the.
They were circulated by email earlier
Thank you,
today.
just checking. Okay.
And Gary, I'd like to add
Yep,
a very brief update on Bowen Transportation Society.
okay. Throw that in under new business.
Yeah, yes, sir.
New business, correspondence, new business. Yeah. 10.7, David?
Sure.
Okay, and Allison?
North Shore Congress.
Okay, and 10.8? All right. So council approved the agenda and late items agenda as amended for the June 24th, 19 regular council meeting. Some that please, Maureen and Joellen, thank you, all in favor? Okay, that is adopted. And public comments. Oh, do we have anybody?
Yeah, we have
Oh, wonderful.
Robertson regarding September Morn Beach.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a little bit of laryngitis, so I'm going to just make it brief.
Do you want to get a little closer? Would that help?
This has been an ongoing issue with September Morn.
Sit down, Kathy, so you.
Yeah.
I did circulate the Bowen Island map beaches, of which all of this area, over 200 homes, have one neighborhood beach, versus this area of the island, which has 7 neighborhood beaches. So our access to September Morn Beach is extremely important, that we are on a cliff. The steps have been ripped away by the logs bumping against the lower steps. I can't get down to the beach to take any photographs for you, so there are none. The ultimate thing that I would like to propose is that we start restoring September Morn Beach to its natural state. This is a long-term plan. A natural state means you actually see the tide lines. Right now, there are no tide lines. It is covered in logs that are up to 10 feet deep. The BC province did a marine atlas study. This shows a healthy beach. September Morn is not a healthy beach. There were some concerns that if you remove logs from this beach, they would just come back. It has taken 28 years for those logs to accumulate on September Morn Beach to the way they are. So it's not unrealistic to have a long-term goal of removing the logs and restoring the beach. Yes, there will be another 28-year accumulation, but at least we can bring it back to where it should be. On our previous provincial government, I spoke with the ADN, and any change for forestry to take responsibility would entail the Forestry Act of BC being changed, because it is still a very old-fashioned forestry act supporting industry. In the meantime, I would like to have a path to the tide line so that I can go for a walk down the stairs, walk just down a narrow path between some logs and swim or sit at where the water's edge is. I can't get there now. No one else can. Even young people can't. My neighbor up the hill has 2 kids. Another neighbor I talked to tried to take 7 kids down to the beach the other day and couldn't do it. So it's not just because of my age. So there was a talk of having a neighborhood chainsaw party. Before, when I explored this, it's very dangerous to use chainsaws on beach logs because of sand and stones. And I had spoken to the logger guys, and I'd spoken to some tree guys on the island, and I'd spoken to some beach combers and stuff in the past. And you also can't burn the logs to get rid of them because they release clouds of dioxins. However, it has come to my attention recently that there is someone who might be willing, for a fee, to chainsaw a path to the beach. And so my initial proposal was, I had asked for $5,000, which got turned down because I've been waiting to submit everything properly, so that's my fault. Which would be to pull some logs off the beach so you get to it. That is obviously unrealistic right now, given the budget restraints that the community has right now. So I hope that you could consider if we can get somebody to chainsaw a path to pay for their hourly rate or whatever it takes for them to do it, because we can't ask non-professionals to do that job. It's too dangerous. And then in the future, I had submitted log removal with the person who cleans out Horseshoe Bay, cleans Sunset Beach, does some cleaning down at Cow Point on private beaches. And he was very reasonable, knew what he was doing, obviously. And there now is a proper place to take the logs, which was the issue the last time. The beachcombers said, oh yeah, we'll just take it out into the strait because that's what we do with them. That has now changed. There now is a place to put the logs. So that's big, because we all decided we didn't want to create navigation hazards. So there you go, that's my story. I have you to consider that. Thanks. Including repairing the steps down.
Yeah,
I mean,
understood.
and there's no sense repairing the steps down if you don't make a path from the steps,
They don't go
because the
somewhere.
log will just go up and whack it out again.
Yeah, with the rising shores, it's gonna be an ongoing problem.
But if you get rid of those logs, I mean, anyway, I will put together a package on that. That's, and I explore with the province, because we do have a new government and that might be a little bit
Do that.
more open to that. And I also think perhaps Islands Trust might be interested in restoration of beaches. There's just been a whole new provincial marine atlas put together. I just was with the naturalists who worked on all the tide lines. And doing the aerial surveys, and she had some aerial surveys of phone, but they weren't posted yet. She couldn't get them to me for tonight. Okay.
All right, thanks very much, guys. I appreciate that.
Thanks.
And Murray applicant regarding variance application.
I've written my presentation today because I don't want to get upset. As you know, Anna Marie and I are applying for a variance approval so we can age in place in the home we have lived in since 2000, in the same cabin we've owned in our family for 61 years, which was originally built in 1914. In 1958, until about 1973, our cabin was just that, a cabin. It had received some renovations like running water, indoor plumbing, and some heat, which we didn't have when we bought it, but that was about it. Anne Marie and I started a three-weekend renovation project that lasted 27 years until we decided to move here and become part of the community. Then we hired somebody to do it right. Over the years, we've had both stop work orders and variance approvals. This year, with Anna Marie's needed hip replacement, we have seen the future, and it's not pretty. We decided to take our main floor guest room, expand it by 8 feet, and make it into our master bedroom on the same floor as our one bathroom. We decided we would do this reno legally and apply for a building permit. We were pretty sure we'd need a variance, as we had obtained one when we built our carport, since we were too close to the neighbor, too close to the water, too close to the road. We needed approval. Since we had received this variance with very little challenge in the past, we assumed this simple request was going to be easy. We contracted with Kiwi Innovations, Michelle's here, one of the 3 partners, to assist in the management of the project. And they've been representing us with the planning department. The variance application was submitted in March. On May 27th, the application was presented to council. All indications from everyone concerned seemed to be that it was a simple application. However, since the addition would extend our home closer to the imagined 60-foot road allowance, we needed the community to have the opportunity to approve or indicate their disapproval. On May 27th, I presented at least 10 letters of approval from the neighborhood and 1 objection. On today's consent agenda, there's a memo indicating there were 2 approval letters and 1 the same disapproval. Thanks to Emma, that objection was overturned. It's obvious that the neighbors would like us to stay as part of the neighborhood, or the Eagle Cliff community. By the way, it's no complaint about the, against the planning department. They're following the rules, which is why we're here asking council for a variance to those rules. What we're asking for tonight is not for just an approval on the requested variance, as it only applies to how close we are to that 60-foot road allowance. There are a couple of new items that have arisen. A couple of weeks ago, everything seemed in order, until this past Monday, when we were advised that our application was flagged, that the proposed siting is likely within the C setback. Surprise. The exception requires that, I don't know what it stands for, BCLS sealed survey of the existing setbacks be provided showing the average of the neighbors' existing setbacks. We provided our survey showing the depth of our property at 73 feet, which is not even close to the required setback. Islands Trust MAP-IT program clearly shows that our property and our neighboring properties are all constructed within the 15 meters of the shore. Then this past Tuesday, we were informed that the existing and proposed lot coverage, as shown on our survey, appears to be very close to the maximum allowed, which is 203 square meters. According to the land use bylaw, flat areas intended for pedestrian or vehicle movement are excluded from lot coverage. We had been originally advised we had 203 square meters available, and that the Muni calculations had our extension coverage at 200.3. All good. However, later this past week, we were advised that based on updated information, we only had 193 square meters to be allowed. Got a problem. We live in Eagle Cliff. On a site plan, our lot looks the same as a similar sized lot in the middle of the island. If it was in the middle of the island, our decks would be a patio. Our lot is virtually vertical. There is almost no part of our home that's less than 2 feet above grade. From 1958 until we constructed our first deck facing the ocean, we had no access to any of our land. It's vertical. All through my teen years and later, we were relegated to a small 10 by 10 sun deck beside the bedroom, or go to the Eagle Cliff Beach if we wanted to enjoy the outdoors, which we can't do now, especially with the hip problem. With the above lot coverage guidelines, if our deck is allocated for pedestrian movement, we would be at 192 square meters, meeting requirements for a building permit approval. If not, we will not obtain that approval for an 8.2 square meter bedroom extension. All we want to do is be able to age in place. All we want to do is continue to be part of this community. We don't want to have to move because our land is not flat. Today's staff report states other implications. The proposed development appears to be very close to exceeding maximum allowed lot coverage. Staff are not in support of any variance to increase lot coverage. We ask council and the planning department to, number one, waive the requirement and expense of having to provide surveys of ours and our neighbors' setbacks, as according to the Islands Trust MAP-IT program, it is very obvious that all of us are too close to the water, and the bedroom is, the fact that the bedroom's on the opposite side away from the water, so it doesn't make any difference anyway. Number two, make the decision that the deck that covers 12 horizontal feet of vertical drop is for pedestrian movement, therefore removing it from the lot coverage calculation so our subsequent building permit can be processed with minimal delay. Without this direction to staff, the time, the cost of these entire proceedings, the letters, the ads, are all moot, as it's clear that we will not be issued a building permit and will be forced to move as we age. Number three, approve our variance permit application.
So Murray, first of all, staff is recommending that your variance be approved.
Yes.
And that's why it's in the consent agenda.
Correct.
The issue with the building permit, as I understand, Daniel, is that your variance was based on numbers that you provided to staff. And it was only after you submitted your building permit application that when staff calculated those numbers that they came up short. We have to separate a building permit application from a variance permit. They are two separate things, and we're following our building permit bylaw and other legislation. As for the setback to the sea, we're not even dealing with that, are we, Daniel?
So too, I mean, with the lot coverage, yeah, so when we're doing the building permit application, and based on the survey you provided of your property is slightly smaller than the Islands Trust map it size of the property, so it reduces the amount of lot coverage you have available. And then we've been looking for more detailed plans from you showing exactly which parts of the deck we would count and not count. So I don't see it as insurmountable. I see it as something that you can have more detailed planning of it. It'll show up exactly what the lot coverage is. But in the report, what's correct is that we've never supported an increase in the lot coverage, and that the lot coverage is the same across the island based on the size of your property. Yeah, but I think we can work it out. I don't see it as a
Okay, because
challenge.
in the
Yeah.
various the
Yeah.
approval, it says that appears to be closed and staff are not in support of any variance to increase.
Yeah.
So which means we won't get the building permit. And that's, we're,
I mean, I think generally often we work on properties that have been developed, so that they come in close to the existing lot coverage, and then we're looking for more detailed plans to show, okay, exactly how are you meeting, this is exactly what you're allowed, and how are you not exceeding it. And it was right, you're sort of right on that level.
no, there is no level.
No,
That's the problem with our property. There is no level, so we have to come in.
May I ask that this be discussed under the agenda item?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take up some time here. It's coming up on the agenda, Maria, and we'll discuss it at that time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Yeah.
Diana Taylor regarding September Morn Beach.
I'm just here to request that the access to September Morn Beach be improved. I've lived here for 42 years. I've always been able to get down to that beach. But now, this year, it was almost impossible. And I understand with clearing all the logs, they could end up there again, with the next storm. But I think we should at least have a pathway cleared that we can get down there. Okay?
Right, thank you.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you.
Becky Dawson regarding Friends of September Morn Beach.
Hello, good evening, and I live on Hummingbird Lane as well, and I don't go down to September Morn Beach anymore because the stairs break off. It's very dangerous. I can't take my dog down because it just drops, and when it was repaired like a year ago, there was still, I take pictures and I send them to the Muni, and flooding with water, it is in great disrepair, so I'm finding it too dangerous to go to the beach. Oh, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Consideration.
Well presented. All right, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Does anybody have anything that they're not happy with in the consent agenda? Michael, sorry.
Yes, I want to pull 3.3, Diana Taylor's letter, please.
Okay.
And I think we should consider that along with 9.2, because they sort of go together.
We want to
Yeah,
deal with
okay.
those up front, so.
Sure, well, they're already left.
And 12.12. The sidewalk. I want to discuss.
12.12?
12.12.
Sure. Yeah.
3.2. Can we pull 3.2, which is the,
Yes, I just got it for that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
just making sure, in case you couldn't ask.
Yeah, I
We're
did.
just gonna do it, but yeah.
Obviously.
Any others?
So what did that carry through? 3.2, 3.3?
3.2, 3.3, and,
12.12.
That's the correspondence from Samuel.
yeah.
Yeah. So where do they go under 11?
Yep.
They should, yeah.
3.3, could it go with 9.1? Or sorry, 9.2.
We already
That's what
agreed
we're
on
doing
that.
that, yeah.
Okay. And where about 3.2?
Well,
It
it's
goes in
gonna,
items from the consent agenda, not just like
So it goes under 11?
11, yeah.
Except we might want to deal with the whole Mr. applicants here rather than sit through the whole meeting.
Yeah.
Are we gonna do the same with 3.39.2 D?
What, how many are in the audience?
No, no.
Oh, they've all gone.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
All right, anybody else? Okay, so the recommendation is council approve the items as outlined in the June 24th, 2019 consent agenda. Have that moved. Thank you, Maureen. Second, David. All in favor? And just before we move on, so we are going to go to 3.2. Is Emma here?
Oh, I forgot to pull
Do they?
3.4. Sorry,
We're just going to see if we can find Emma and then get yours.
I was thinking the end of the consent agenda was the top of the page.
So are we not past the consent agenda?
We're just going to go back and do this one item that we pulled 3.2 because it's Murphy's and
Is it too late for me to pull
Bauer is still here.
3.4?
Well, do we do that for other?
Okay, fine.
No, there's nobody else here. If they were still here, I might do it.
Let's do next one.
Okay, Emma, we're just, we pulled the item 3.2 out of the consent agenda, so I just wondered if you could talk about that.
Is this one for
Cleator Road.
Cleator Road?
Yeah,
Um,
if you're prepared.
We have the report.
Were you here for the public comment?
no, I wasn't.
Okay, so we better update what the issue is.
Was there a concern?
So, Marie had presented asking for the setback to the sea and the increase in lot coverage to include in his variance.
Oh, no, I was not aware of that request until now. And it was not included in the report that went to council for consideration. It would require a revised application and public notice would need to be
Redone.
redone. Yeah.
So I think, there's two different ones. So one is the setback to the sea, and I think, just looking at the map and when we were looking at it earlier this week, when the applicant's site planner provided the distance and saying, oh, this is how far it is from the sea, we said, oh, shoot, it's within 30 meters of the sea. Having said that, our land use bylaw has provisions that says you can vary it down to, it gets reduced automatically down to 15 meters based on showing from the neighboring properties, and looking at the neighboring properties, both the houses are within the 30 meters. So something that we flagged as part of the building permit review on our planning technician's check was saying, is this within 30 meters? No, and if no, you go to, okay, does it meet these follow-up steps? I don't see it as an issue in terms of the building permit. It'll show that, okay, the neighbors are significantly closer, and so it meets that reduction provision. And then the second one is the lot coverage. And that's one where, so in part, all the mapping have different sizes, so the subdivision plan is a different lot size than our online mapping system, then the survey submitted as part of the application are all slightly different sizes, and our allowable lot coverage is based on percent of the lot. About 100 square meters plus 10% of the lot. So as the lot, depending on what size the actual lot is, you get a different amount of lot coverage. And the second is we include decks if they're higher than 2 feet off the ground. And given the nature of 1477 Cleator, the ground slopes and the deck stays level, so in some places the deck is less than 2 feet, in some places it's more. So again, when our planning technician is doing the check based on what the applicant provided in areas that were above that 0.2 meters, we had different areas, different amounts that were then added up, and when she added it all up, it was slightly over the allowable lot coverage based on the survey of the property the applicant had provided. And I don't think significantly, like, I think it was sort of 7 square meters or something in that range. And so like I was saying earlier, that's not something that's uncommon when we get building permits, especially on smaller lots where they frequently come up against the lot coverage maximum. And what we expect and work with applicants to do is, one is, okay, now that they know that they're up against the limit, is better refine and more accurately map and make sure you've gone and checked out everywhere where it's, you get the exception for being under 2 feet, so you can accurately show, okay, this is exactly how much lot coverage I have. And then in some circumstances, it's reducing the size, so people take down sheds to build new bedrooms, or they just carve off a piece of their deck to build a new deck somewhere else, or there's sort of a give and take, and that, so for example, I know everybody in Sun's Point is pretty much over their lot coverage, and every time they want to build something new, they're playing this game of trading off bits and pieces, or making sure you've exactly shown how much you've done. And so like Emma said in the report, that's not something that staff generally has supported. We generally support a revised building location based on site circumstances on Bowen, but we haven't, as long as I've here, haven't supported increasing the overall lot coverage. That's what everyone's allowed to build based on the size of your lot, and we're not really interested in supporting changing that as opposed to changing where you're going to build it on the site. So in terms of how we had felt given that initial building permit check, in preparing the final report and talking about it as a department, was that, okay, we weren't prepared to agree to say, okay, we'll just increase the lot coverage in your application, but we were comfortable moving forward with the variance and saying that the rest, the other bit, so the setback to the sea was captured in the building permit application, captured in those provisional values by the let you vary it and reduce it. And that the lot coverage is something that we could work out that may mean that some pieces, something else on the property would get reduced in size to allow the thing to go forward, but that was part of the building permit process.
So these items were, we discussed as a department last week, and I had also discussed with the applicant that these were concerns that were flagged during the building permit application review. And like Daniel had said, it would not necessarily, stop. Staff still supports the development variance permit application as proposed, but to keep in mind, when they go to get their building permit, they do need to address the lot coverage, that they're within the maximum lot coverage, as well as the setback to the sea, which does appear that with their neighbors being close to the sea, they would be within the average existing setback, but they would need to show by survey, which they didn't have time to do for the variance, and we don't require them to do for the variance because they haven't asked for a setback to the sea reduction. But if they would like to revise their variance application, then it would no longer be considered tonight, just to be clear. But that was not discussed. And also, the applicant is actually Lindsay Turin.
Yeah, Michelle's here
To represent Lindsay. And we never got the request to withdraw or revise the application. So that's why it's news to me.
Yeah, no, I think the intent, missing Murray's discussion that he indicated, is that we are supportive of the variance as staff as written. We think we can deal with this, and this is the discussion we had as staff last week, that the setback to the sea, there's enough flexibility as both of you have indicated with the owner. So that's a non-issue in staff's mind. The issue remains the amount of building on the lot.
Awesome.
So it doesn't have to mean, it could mean shading a teeny bit off the deck or something, not
That's correct.
not having to make the addition smaller.
Or even lowering a deck to be within the
Putting
exception.
one step in and lowering it. The other question, I guess, is how come map of lot size is different from the survey?
Anything to do with setback to the sea, it depends what line you've done. So there'll be a subdivision plan that have the sea, natural boundary of the sea where they drew it from, here to here,
yeah.
right? And then when they do it actually on the lot, they go, okay, it's different. So any older subdivision along the sea is very different.
Yeah.
And nothing Mapit, the area from Mapit comes from their cadastral, from their GIS data, which isn't necessarily survey data.
Just for my clarification, so the house itself is legal non-conforming, because it's not far enough away from the water, obviously. Now, is that a technical, if it's legal non-conforming, he builds on the other side of the house? I mean,
It would- Well, so
Common
one
sense
is
would say.
I think given the reduction in the land use bylaw, which allows you to be based on the neighbors, I think we'd say they're probably outside.
Oh, I don't think
the
there'd be an
setback.
issue there, no.
But in general, like if there's a 30-meter setback and your house was within it, if you wanted to extend on any side, you would need a variance to extend even on the far side, even though it doesn't, maybe intuitively make sense that,
No,
it's further from the sea, but if it's within that 30-meter line, that's still a 30-meter line.
Still within this.
Yeah.
No, I understand all that, it just seems a little bit silly.
Yeah.
Anyway, anybody else got, sorry, Maureen?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand what's in the best interest of everyone here. Is there any advantage for the proponent to withdrawing the variance, asking that it be deferred, and coming back with all of these issues addressed? So for example, is there any difference in terms of the fees that he would have to pay?
I mean, I think if that's the way council wants to go, I'd recommend instead that you just say you defer it to the whatever the next meeting is, the July 8th meeting. Then we don't have to re-advertise, we just deferred it. And so then anyone who got the initial notice, if they were interested, they would have come to this meeting, and you can just defer it from this meeting to the next meeting and not re-advertise. So if council wanted more time, that's what I would recommend.
And in that 2-week period, the issues, well, there isn't an issue around setback to the sea from what you're saying, and the issue around the excess of the 7 square meters of lot coverage. Are there other buildings on the lot that could be modified in order to gain the 7 square meters? Do you
I mean,
know?
I remember when I was looking at it, based on our planning technicians reviewing, I thought that the most logical ones to look at and actually go there and be super detailed in mapping the deck in terms of what was above and below, where we start counting it as lot coverage,
Right.
and considering what we consider stairs as opposed to deck, or walkways as opposed to deck, or where the foundation is versus the overhang of the building, and all those details in terms of just shaping it down. I think there's another step there that we normally, like, there's just a building permit, and people are planning to have them do that first step of say, okay, go calculate, make sure you're 100%, because one thing people often, when they do lot coverage, kind of do a general, right? They go, well, this is it.
Right.
And they say, okay, you're close, now go and do it better.
And is that calculation done by municipal staff or by somebody else?
It would be submitted in the plan, and then the municipal staff would do the math.
So a surveyor would do that, or who does
So
it?
in terms of what's existing, it's often that, it's like the applicant is an architect or an engineer or somebody who's drawing up the plans. In theory, the homeowner can do it too. And then it's checked by our plan checkers for the building permit application.
So a closer look
Yeah.
in the coming 2 weeks.
What would be, to Maureen's point, what would be the most expeditious route for the proponent to take to get this all finished up?
Issue the DBP.
Okay, okay.
Let planning and building work with the applicant through the building permit process.
Yeah.
But I would highly recommend issuing the DBP.
I would recommend that, because this is really, in terms of land, this is a small issue. It's complicated by the age of the house, the way the lot slopes, and if that's the way to resolve it to everyone's satisfaction, the quickest, the least expensive, the least troublesome, then I certainly would support that, because we are going to come across other examples very similar to this, I'm sure. And you know, if that's the most helpful, the quickest, and it takes the least of the proponent's time and planning's time, then please let's proceed along those lines.
So,
I'd like to move that council issue development variance permit DVP 03-2019 for the variance of the front lot line setback from 7.5 meters to 3.9 meters for 1477 Cleator Road, legally described as Lot B of Lot 5, Block 6 to 8, District Lot 1552, Group 1, NWD, Plan BCP 25140, PID 026759560.
Second.
Okay. Any further discussion? The only thing I would say is a proponent to work with the building department as soon as you can for that, get on that building permit and see if we can make that work for you. Any further discussion? Thank you, all in favor? Okay. Thank you. All right. Thank you. So delegations. Thank you. And business arising from the minutes. Sue Ellen, reconciliation workshop.
Okay, I put this on the agenda after, sometime 2 weeks ago, I was talking to people on council, and the Islands Trust.
Sorry, Morn, what I missed.
What happened to 3.110? Oh, it's on consent. My apologies.
Yeah.
Sorry, Sylvia.
Okay. Continue.
Islands Trust has a senior intergovernmental policy advisor, Lisa Wilcox, who used to work for the Squamish Nation. She's been going around to various islands within the Islands Trust offering workshops, and she will come and do one for Bowen Council, if Bowen Council would like. The suggestion I would make, having been to a couple of these, one with the Islands Trust Conservancy and one with Denman Island Local Trust Committee, is to treat it like a closed professional development activity. And the reason for that is that it's a chance for council members to feel comfortable with the material, ask all the questions that they might have, and to take the advice or listen to Lisa, who's got tons of experience. And I think in an open council meeting, councillors might feel constrained and not want to ask questions, you know, so, yeah, just a workshop. And that way, we can ask questions frankly and air our, not feel like we're on display or being judged or anything like that, because we have invited Squamish Council to come and meet with us.
Yep.
We've got members of the community who are advocates for First Nations reconciliation, and they're asking us questions. It would be good to know what's what, and we might want to know what's the wording for a territorial acknowledgement at the beginning of a meeting. Those kinds of things are things that she can answer. So 1.5 hours, something like that. If you'd like, this has been offered. So I'm just, I have other information here if people would like. Let's see if I cover everything. Help all of us be on the same page with the background information specific to Howe Sound. So if that's something people would like, if you could make a motion, then I can take it to Islands Trust. And the motion would just simply be that Bowen Island Municipal Council request a reconciliation workshop facilitated by Lisa Wilcox.
Well, I think it would be very timely. How does everybody feel about that?
Yeah.
Good, yeah.
Okay, can I have a secondary?
I will, because she's a very impressive lady, by the way. I met her and comes across extremely well, and I would be in everybody's interest.
Very good. Okay.
Yeah, all in favor, but I don't know if we actually voted. What was it?
Well, do you want to read the motion?
Sorry.
The council will request a reconciliation workshop facilitated by Lisa Wilcox, Islands Trust Intergovernmental Policy Advisor. That's her title?
Senior, I wasn't going to put her title in, but feel free. Senior Intergovernmental Policy Advisor, Lisa Wilcox.
I'm assuming we don't pay anything for this.
This is one of the things that we can ask for as a member of the Islands Trust Federation. As I understand it, if it's not, we will find out.
Okay, yeah, we'll just investigate that.
Yep.
Sorry, was that the end of it?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So all in favor? Thank you.
Okay,
Unanimous.
thank you.
Well,
That's on my to-do list now.
okay. Raj, Funding for the Bowen Island Municipality for Birch. Take it away.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This report is a follow-up report to the staff report that was provided to Mayor and Council at the June 10th council meeting. As per the CAO request at the June 10th meeting, staff met with Robin Fenton of Birch to discuss a reduction in the request for funding from $25,000 to $10,000 for the 2010 financial year. Robin Fenton was amicable to the reduction, and hence the staff recommendation in this report, which is that council approve an expenditure of $10,000 in grant funding to be awarded to Bowen Island Resilient Housing, and that council directs staff to include a budget provision in the 2019 fall financial plan amendment for an expenditure of $10,000 for grant funding to Birch to be funded from general fund accumulated surplus.
I'll move
I'd
that.
be happy to answer any questions.
A second, okay, Rob, and anybody for any further discussion? I'll ask a question, all in favor? And 5.3, Kathy Lalonde,
This is a-
CAO.
This is an update on the Blue Water Park and King Edward Bay water system situation. I've circulated the report earlier today, and it's also being sent out to the LACs and pushed out to the members of all the communities. I won't go through the specific background that was discussed at the last council meeting about the 2 new wells that were drilled and the outcome of those 2 wells. Surface well is viable, the deep well, they indicate it's not viable to pursue. Working with our consultants, we met with them the following day after the last council meeting. They anticipate 2 potential causes for the lack of water in the existing wells. The problem being fouling of the well equipment, so the screens that are on the well itself, or depletion of the aquifer source due to overuse. Each of these causes would result in very different mitigative responses. Obviously, the fouling of the equipment would be an easier fix. So they have proposed a 4-phase work plan to assess and evaluate the aquifer and well field, and to identify options for potentially increasing the overall well field productivity. They're right now in phase 1, which is the background information review. They're just finishing that off, and we're hoping for an interim report by next week. We'll find out more towards the end of this week. The second phase is to assess the existing bedrock wells 1 to 4, to inspect, and what they're going to do is install equipment. We learned a lot about transducers into the existing blue water wells so the aquifer performance can be accurately assessed. This will be done within the next 10 days. Our contractor was already scheduled to come out, so they have been booked and they're coming out to install this equipment so we can monitor. The third phase, which will be a concurrent phase, is assess the productivity of the new shallow well. This could take up to a year to legalize the well itself. So there's no short-term solutions. So what we're recommending as staff, and certainly the consultants, that both King Edward Bay and Blue Water Park systems remain under stage 4 water restrictions. Staff have indicated that Blue Water's reservoir is still at the same low level, but King Edward's Bay is almost full. King Edward Bay production should be able to sustain both water systems, provided that the water restrictions continue and consumptions remain at the current level. Urban Systems will review to see if there's opportunity in the near term to further optimize the system performance of the interconnected systems to ensure that all residents' minimum water requirements are met. We are continuing to provide ongoing reminders to King Edward Bay and Blue Water Park communities to adhere to the stage 4 water restrictions. Bylaw services go out and they are monitoring as well. Once Urban Systems have presented their interim report to Council, a public information meeting will be held to present and report and answer questions from the public. And our consultants will be at that meeting as well. So in the meantime, as I've indicated, there is no immediate solution other than to continue with the stage 4 water restrictions. This is what staff are recommending. What this does as well, it's very hard for these communities to be under these types of water restrictions so quickly. So one of the ideas is maybe our communications coordinator working with, whether it's the LACs, I was also thinking the environment committee, as they deal with water conservation, is one under their mandate, to come up with some ideas of how we can assist these two communities throughout the summer to provide water. I don't have these answers, but I'd suggest some type of workshop where we can maybe help them out. But I think more importantly, one of the things I've been working on, and I don't have complete yet, is the history of those water systems. And when the petition was brought forward to form the King Edward Bay water system 12 years ago, it was under the condition that it would supply water to both Blue Water and Bowen Bay. A few years later, when the subdivision was approved, again, it was a condition of the subdivision that water be provided to the two older water systems.
To both.
To both. There was a whole public consultation done. King Edward Bay wasn't formed at the time, but with Blue Water and Bowen Bay. Bowen Bay opted out in 2008. Blue Water agreed to continue to be part of this interconnected system. I'm still researching what happened between then and 2013 when the King Edward Bay water system, LAC, was given a choice of whether to opt in or opt out. And I don't have those answers yet. I'm trying to find them within the next couple of days to get a report out to all the residents. But fundamentally, the agreement was, when that water system was formed, that it would provide water to the other two water systems. It didn't end up being that way. It ended up being selling water instead. And as I said, I'm still trying to get to the bottom of what happened in those years. I have a whole bunch of more reports to go through. And I will be presenting that both to our consultants who want to understand the history of how we got here, and also to council and the public. I'm hoping to have that out by the end of the week. So I think one of the big things, my big takeaway after immersing myself in a couple of weeks of this water system issue, is that in the long term, and we've talked about this at the council level and strategic planning, is BIM needs to look at an overall master plan of its water utilities to ensure sustainable service delivery. This would include a complete water budget, factoring in community growth and projected climate change. It would also include looking at creating a single optimized water utility. And if you look at the staff reports from 2006, from Brad Hawthorne and Joanne Cundy, our then Director of Finance and Director of Engineering, who recommended a merged water system 12 years ago. And they left it up to the community members who said no. I think as council, as staff, we need to really look at what's best for the whole island. And it is not 7 separate water systems. And so what we will be bringing forward is, once this settles down a bit, is look at overall water management and conservation strategies for both municipal and private systems. I think we could have saved ourselves a lot of grief in the last 12 years if we followed the directions of staff at that time.
Maureen first.
Is there any possibility of going to a modified stage 3? And I'm not asking for an answer right now, but maybe running it by urban systems. That some of the concerns that people have expressed lots of concerns, but some of the specific concerns that seem to hit home have to do with people's gardens. And investments that have been made there, expectations around summer on Bowen. If you look at the difference between stage 3 and stage 4, lawn watering is prohibited in both. Flower and vegetable gardens is restricted but still permitted in stage 3. It's prohibited in stage 4. Car, boat washing, surface power washing, I think we could do without those given the situation. But maybe just bringing back that bit of restricted water, hand watering, or spring-loaded shut-off nozzle only for flowers and vegetable gardens. I think it might take some of the sting out of this.
Thank you, Maureen. David?
Yeah, it's difficult for me to speak on this. Most of you know I live in King Edward Bay, and you also probably know that I'm a big gardener. It's our hobby.
Yeah.
And so, we're in the situation, there's some of the letters that I've received from the public, we're in the situation of losing thousands of dollars worth of trees and shrubs, and, an entire vegetable garden with tomatoes and squash and all the rest of it. So some sort of ability to at least hand water some of the outdoor stuff would be critical. I appreciate the report. It's great to at last have some information, even though it's discouraging information. I guess I have one, and I didn't know that condition of the subdivision came into that was new information for me right now. I didn't know that. But one technical question, you said that looking at the well, the blue water well right now to see whether it was, an issue of a problem with the well itself. If the good news might be in 10 days,
Yeah.
that thing could be,
Yeah.
so it's possible.
It's
There
possible.
is one
so
possibility
yeah.
that in 10 days we
Yeah.
might actually get some good news.
Yeah.
So I'd certainly appreciate that little bit, but I also appreciate Maureen's
Yeah.
point, and if there is some possibility of doing that, I mean, I was glad to see, I know my neighbors have gone up and had a look at the tank, and the tank is pretty well full at King Edward Bay. So, maybe it's possible for us to do that. I also appreciated the letter and your comments about maybe there's some way of getting some help, and I don't know what that could be. The trouble is gardening is the issue, and gardening takes a lot of water. You can't just sort of, bring a pot over to somebody's house. We had dinner for people the other night, and everyone says, what should I bring? I was going to suggest bringing water. Anyway, thank you. Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to, based on both of what you said, is maybe a revised recommendation, council direct staff to discuss with Urban Systems a modified stage 3 water restriction in Blue Water Park. I think it would be a water system area. We're meeting with Urban Systems on Wednesday, so we can, I'll talk to them tomorrow.
I've moved that.
And I'd be happy to second, but have someone else second it.
Okay, okay, and any further discussion on that part of it? Okay, all in favor?
Well, hang on, we've got the whole motion here.
We're receiving for information.
Yeah.
We didn't.
No. So are you in,
Can we
Allison?
just- Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I had the wording.
Okay, that's,
Sorry,
What's the wording?
hang on just 1 second. I just need to.
Clerk, may I make a comment on this one
Sure.
here? Because Kathy, you brought up the environmental committee, I think, and I think, looking sort of long-term down the road with this water shortage becoming a bigger issue, and I garden 2.5 acres, so I know what it's like, but, moving away from using, drinkable water for gardening, right? And ways that we can look at using our gray water more efficiently, which is what I do. And I know that may involve talking to the building inspector about some of our bylaws and whatnot. But I really hope we don't lose that, because I think that's the future, where, it's not like, your bathtub empties out. It'd be nice if it goes out in the garden, right? And what we as a municipality can do to facilitate that, and if there are sort of roadblocks in the way to doing that, that we look at creatively maybe opening up those opportunities instead of just pumping.
And talking to our consultant, what we need to do is, one, we need to amend our subdivision servicing bylaw to include different ways of using cisterns. Evergreen's a good example of a subdivision, and Grafton Lake, the new subdivision, where it's a requirement of any new development to have that cutting edge tech, not even cutting edge anymore. But I think what we're seeing in Blue Water is what we're going to be grappling with island-wide. There's no getting away from this.
it should be in our building.
So I would like to see this part of the 2020 strategic plan. I'd like to bring something forward in September, finding a budget amount so it's not forgotten over our rainy winter either. We need to start dealing with this, and we need to start dealing with the water management plan ASAP.
Okay, so
That's great.
I just wanted to say, when several of us, Maureen and I especially, came in 2015, I guess in the spring of 2015, we were faced with the fires in the Caribou and the spill of the Marathassah oil. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of emergencies, and drought was one of them. And we started looking at our drought preparedness then. Anyway, I just wanted to flag that we did do a whole bunch of work on this water conservation page, which includes a lot of, I wouldn't call them tips, I would call them approaches that people could take, and some measurements too, so they can see by shortening your shower by 5 minutes, how many liters can you save, that kind of thing. And it talks about, anyway, there's a bunch of useful information there that we can refer people in the community to, and maybe we can add things to it as well. We did have Islands Trust presented that well water workshop, because I think we need to think about all the members of our community and water security for Bowen Island, including everybody who's on a well.
Yeah.
Because the water districts is one thing and the well users is another. And I think they're all part of our community. We need to think about, they all interact. You know, it's all the same water and the same rainfall in the winter. And the last thing I just want to mention is that other islands in the Islands Trust are feeling this even harder than Bowen, because they're in the lee of Vancouver and the southern Gulf. Galiano is where I was with Michael a few days ago. When I went there about 4 years ago, when you sat down at a restaurant, you were asked if you wanted to buy some water, because their tourism, the tourism side of things uses a lot of water too. Not that we have to go that way, but just that other islands have been feeling the pinch for a long time. Islands Trust now has a freshwater specialist with all the papers and credentials, so if Urban Systems or whoever we're working with needs another set of professional advice or ideas or point to resources, then that's something else that we can ask for as a council, is for some help with issues like that.
What was interesting, Daniel, you contacted David Marler, the Islands Trust, and they don't actually have any bylaws in place about water conservation, which was, we did find kind of.
So then one of the regional managers has followed up this morning, actually, said two of the, Galiano and Saturno both have limited areas that require, in their land use bylaw, require cisterns at time of new building.
Yes, and Galiano has, it's almost all development permit areas, including a high elevation water permeability bylaw.
Yeah.
So, you know, they do, and there's also a directive bylaw straight from the policy statement, 4.4.2, says that if there's any issue around or any concern about whether there will be enough water, then you don't issue a rezoning permit or whatever. You don't allow the density to go there. So there's a bunch of things, and but it's true. As you can imagine, smaller islands that aren't municipalities are, many of them are also playing catch up. And that's why we've hired we as the Islands Trust have hired the freshwater specialist.
But I also think we have an opportunity here to be leading edge with our water management to help out other islands as well.
Yeah, I totally agree, and this is what, it's just the working together side of it, I thought could be useful to both sides if needed, so I'm just putting it out there.
I just want to make sure this doesn't get lost in this conversation. We're talking about 200 odd households
Close to, so 100,
across the island, and we have 1,500 odd households across the island. So in terms of people who are experiencing water issues now,
15%.
It's not the whole island,
No.
and I think we have to be cautious about making people alarmed. In 2015, in that very, very dry summer, the people who were impacted were the well users in particular. And there were some concerns around Grafton, and one of the responses with Grafton was my recollection is that the level of the dam was raised slightly, and it created significant additional capacity. And my understanding is that the level of the dam can be raised again, creating additional capacity for the 600 odd people who are on Hope Bay water. The correspondence that came from Virginia Penny, which is included in our agenda, I think makes a really important point that from Virginia's perspective, we're not experiencing a water shortage per se, we're experiencing a mechanical problem that didn't get addressed at a certain point.
Well,
Maybe.
we don't
okay.
it's a storage.
But I think keep that in mind, in that, and it keeps coming up over and over again. We don't have a water shortage, we have a storage
issue
for our water, and that's what we need to be addressing.
We need to be managing our water.
Okay, if I may.
Yes.
Just one point. First, I think I'd like just to record my thanks to Kathy and the team for pulling this report together. Some of it is positively forensic in fact, are going back in all those old records. And
So will you just wait?
as someone with mild dyslexia, believe me, I have the greatest admiration for someone who can actually wade their way through all of that. So, and I think it is important. If I may, what I'd like to address, what I'm looking forward to, obviously we need to address this because we know it, and that steps in hand. And I think what I'll be looking to, and I think others will as well, after all this, is where we take it from there. Because I think that this has been a wake-up call.
Yes.
I think it has compelled us to bring all our paperwork and all the issues up to date. And I hope it will also compel us to bring something, I don't like the word strategic plan, but for want of anything better, a go-forward, a proper go-forward, where we as a municipality really do manage our water areas in the most appropriate way, and the important decisions aren't delayed. And quite honestly, if costs have to be passed on, and we don't shrink from that task either, to make sure that we have water and we don't have houses which open the tap and nothing comes out. So I look forward to the go-forward plan.
I am as well.
Quickly, so
I think this is great, and I just wanted to flag that I didn't mean to alarm anybody, but in an average year, the drought map of BC would be all green at this time of year, and already it's yellow. So it is shaping up to be a potentially very dry year. So that's why I just wanted to put the water conservation ideas out there and let people, this is the head of the Water Forecast Center was saying if this kind of weather persists, we're going to be in challenging situations when we get in the later part of the summer. This is Campbell who urged people to start conserving now, particularly in places that rely on local streams and rivers.
We need a water management strategy because we have to be proactive rather than reactive.
Yeah.
And we have an
Exactly correct.
opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no question, we wouldn't even have thought of this 20 years ago. There's never been any water shortages on Bowen as long as I've been here, which is 50 years. We never would have thought about it. Things have changed. And as far as scaring people, I think we have to scare them because we have to let them know that there's a potential problem here. And we as a municipality have to manage this problem. And we have to, and we can manage it. But we have to think about it in different terms than we used to.
And we also have to stop thinking that there's 7 separate water systems.
Yeah.
We have to look at it as one.
We're all in this together, yeah.
And that there's the costs involved in managing 7 separate water systems is horrendous on top of everything else.
Yeah.
And managing by committee and having committees make operational decisions can't go forward.
Thank you.
Okay, very briefly, just on the storage, we all know that it's going to the summers will be hotter and drier and it's tough, but actually the winters will be wetter. So there is a storage opportunity. It's not there'll be less water, there'll be more water. It's all the wrong season.
Considerable, that's a considerable problem.
and approved the allocation of about 0.15 hectares, or just around 0.37 acres, each to the Health Center Foundation and to Birch for their respective projects. Also with the expectation that all, or at least most of the parking could be retained on their individual properties. And at that time, council also asked for staff to come forward with, for Birch, the draft agreement to lease for your consideration at this time. So the draft agreement to lease has been prepared, and you have that attached to your staff report. So an agreement to lease essentially is a precursor to an actual lease. We don't actually have a parcel that we can lease right now. So pending that, pending a subdivision, a parcel that's created by subdivision, the agreement to lease provides some assurances, certainly to people that Birch is looking to for funding, that the municipality is serious about providing the parcel. It provides assurances to us that Birch is serious about proceeding, and it is intended to protect the interest of both parties going forward. It also sets out the general directions and the expectations that we have of each other as we go forward and actually prepare the lease. So you have that in front of you tonight. The agreement to lease that's attached to the report has been reviewed by Birch, and it's also been reviewed by Chris Murdy, so their comments have all been right now. We have one big piece of property, about almost 3.5 acres. The fire hall certainly is proceeding on the northern plus or minus acre, and There are two other areas for these other two uses, so it is really incumbent on us to get on with the subdivision so that it can meet the timelines for both the Health Society and for Birch as they go forward. So the recommendation for you tonight is that Council receive the draft agreement to lease between the municipality and Birch that is included in this report. That Council refer this draft agreement to the Mayor's Standing Committee on Community Lands and direct staff to refer the agreement once the committee has had a chance to look at it and make comment, or that any comment that's received tonight, that we refer this to the municipal solicitor to draft it in a form that's ready for signing by both parties, and that we report back with the revised agreement to lease for Council's consideration, hopefully by July 22nd. We'll certainly try to do that. The other recommendation before you tonight from staff is that Council direct us to bring forward a report regarding the processing of the subdivision. We hope to meet with the other parties and come back to you with a report talking about cost sharing, but also requesting some budget, because there will be costs associated with that from a municipal point of view in terms of, most of it is our land, some of it is theirs, but there will be costs associated with surveying and some engineering costs and other incidental costs related to the fact that you are the subdivision applicant. So the recommendation is that we be directed to bring a report back in that regard.
Any questions? Right.
No.
I'll move that.
Okay, second.
David, further discussion? So,
Just checking, you're moving this whole big recommendation
yes.
as presented?
Yes.
And as is in the agenda, just in case anybody's watching from away, page 5 of 238 has a whole recommendation.
Yes.
Well, I'll be speaking, I'll be voting in support of this. I think this is wonderful that all parties are doing such a lot of hard work to synthesize all the possibilities into something that also leaves lots of land for the future and ideas for future work. I had one question, and that is, when you said for the last recommendation about council directing staff to bring a report to council about the process of subdivision of community lands, you said some of it will be their land? What did you mean? Well, most of the land will remain in the ownership of the municipality, the fire hall site, and the remaining land to the south of the two parcels. Some will be leased to Birch, and some will actually be, I understand, the notion is it will be sold to the Health Center Foundation. Just checking. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment, and at our last council meeting where we took another jump where everybody just put up their hands and it was like done like that. And I know there's been a lot of behind the scenes work, especially on the Mayor's Council, but also there's a lot of sort of tension, especially with the changing in size, location and whatnot. And I just want to commend Robin and also the Health Center for working through that. And I think at the end of the day, we got probably something better right now, having gone through that difficult process. And I just think it speaks to that need to have some good conversations and collaboration between different groups, which hasn't happened on all of Lot 3. So I really commend you for working through that. And I really hope that it's going to be, that when we see some of the designs, that whole spirit of a walkable community, that will really be ingrained in the design as well as we move forward for that. So I think it'll be very exciting to see that happen in the Cove.
Thanks, Rob. Any further discussion? I'll ask a question. All in favor? Thank you, unanimous. 7.3 is back to Emma. Read the development variance permit.
Could I just interject for a second?
Yes.
Mark, we love having you at the meeting, but just in case you weren't aware, the terms of reference were amended through the consent agenda.
Okay.
So.
We still have another one too.
Oh, well, okay then.
Yeah.
But it said, You didn't know that had
Fascinating.
It's sarcastic.
Alright. Sorry for the confusion earlier, I thought I was actually going early for this application. Introducing a new development variance permit application for 345 Cardina Drive, located in Snug Cove, right by the ferry terminal here. And this property contains an existing house. It's quite a small lot, 2 accessory buildings, a shed and a boathouse. And it's hard to make out here, but stairways accessing the main entrance, actually encroaching on the neighbor's property, as well as a corner of the boathouse. Almost all of the buildings are within required setbacks because this lot is so small. It is a settlement residential 2 zone, required setbacks 7.5 from the front, 3 from the side, and 30 from the ocean. The applicant is requesting a reduction in setbacks and increase in deck projection to enable a replacement house, largely in the existing house footprint here. The proposal will also remove the accessory buildings and all encroachments. We didn't get any concerns from the internal referrals. And OCP Objective 57 actually supports continued historic siting variances in established neighborhoods, which this is. I think that's the points I wanted to make, that the lot is very small for the required setbacks in this zone, giving a very small allowed building area. I think I cited in the report it's about 400 square feet. So it doesn't really allow for a viable building site, or a replacement house cannot viably be constructed without a variance. So staff supports going forward with public notice, that consideration be at the next meeting, the July 22nd council meeting.
So,
I don't know if you mentioned it, but I was pleased to see that the neighbors on both sides didn't have concerns, right? So that was good to see.
They had given letters of support, both neighbors and directly adjacent neighbors.
Right, thank you. And I support the idea, and I'd be prepared to make a motion if people are.
I will second it.
Okay, so I'll just make it a notice be given that council will be considering the issuance of development permits, variance permit DVP 05/2019 for the variance of side C setback and maximum deck projection into a setback for 345 Cardina Drive, legally described as Lot 30, Block 3, Plan 11088, District Lot 490, PID 009-163, 379 at the July 22nd, 2019 meeting of council. And that council authorized staff to give notice for the consideration of issuance of development permits, variance permit DVP 05/2019 in accordance with Section 499 of the Local Government Act to all properties within 100 meters of the legal boundary of 345 Cardina Drive, legally described as Lot 30, Block 3, Plan 11088, District Lot 490, PID 009-163, 379.
I'm sorry, do you mind repeating that?
I'm sorry, I'm doing this for,
I know.
I think sometimes we move through them fast,
Yes.
and I'm just going, people might be watching from afar,
Very
or
articulate.
ever something else anymore.
second, please.
Thank you for, yes.
Okay,
Thank
Michael,
you for doing that.
any further discussion?
Just a question, how big is the proposed new dwelling? Do you know?
I don't have the square footage.
1,874 square feet, looking at this map.
It's in there?
It's very small print. For
Oh.
one point.
I do have it actually right here in this. It's 1,674 square feet.
800 or 600, I think.
Oh, I see.
Sorry, for the proposed or the existing?
Well, I'm looking at the
Existing dwelling on this set, page
Map.
72 says 834 square feet.
834, it actually also has that existing A-frame.
which is connected by decking, another 252 square feet.
Oh, okay.
So the dwelling itself is gonna be roughly double.
No, 800 plus 200 is 1,000, plus the shed is gone, right?
Yeah, so about 500 more square feet.
Okay, thank you.
And they're including the garage into that square footage.
Okay, thanks.
So my question was, have they submitted their building permit application?
No.
So we don't know about the lot coverage issue?
The exact lot coverage?
Well, the one that just came up on the previous variance.
I did a rough calculation, and it's below the maximum. I mean, it's not close like the last one.
It's really hard to blow this up on here and read the numbers.
Emma, for some reason, can you put that picture back? I don't think we have to do a site visit. Is anybody interested in that?
No.
No, the actual photograph. Yeah, I'm just having a problem trying to figure out where that is.
Oh, on Cardina?
Yeah, like and the houses next to it don't seem to be.
Marina is about 3 properties down, so it's about.
Oh, okay.
And up to the point, there's 2 properties to the point.
To the point.
Two to the point.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's kind of midway between the point and the marina.
Like this, they're almost at the cul-de-sac, see?
Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
So is this the house with all the ramps in front of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've got it. I'll have to look at it again, though.
It has a boathouse. It's hard to tell from this. It's hard to tell from this aerial because the blue water covers it, but there is a boathouse here.
Oh, okay.
But I don't believe there's more structures of that. It's just the boathouse. And then there's like 2 concrete.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's wharf going out right there, and they have the aluminum boat, right? Yeah.
No, the boat.
They have a boat.
Okay, so did we get that to vote on?
No, you call
I
it,
forget.
it's called a vote, called second.
All in favor? Thank you, Gideon. Right. Thanks, Emma. Raj, back to you for the Statement of Financial Information 2018.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
What were they doing sneaking out on us?
They didn't want to hear about the Sophie?
Yeah, that's right.
So Mayor and Council, the report before you is the Statement of Financial Information, which is regulatory reporting required of all municipalities to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs, also known as a SOFI. The SOFI must be approved by Council before June 30th of each year. And the SOFI reporting is generally comprised of basically the annual financial statements of the municipality for the previous year, or the audited statements, a listing of amounts paid to suppliers, identifying those suppliers who received payments of greater than $25,000 each, and the ones under $25,000 are just reported as one bulk or some number. It also includes amounts paid to mayor and council as remuneration and expenses for attending conferences or for professional development and for attending events. And it contains a separate listing of amounts paid to staff for the year for base remuneration and expenses for professional development, identifying those staff that were that are earned a base salary of higher than $75,000 separately, and then just a consolidated number for the rest of staff. That being said, in the report, I've provided a little bit additional information for council members in comparison to what's required by the regulation, and that is for those payments of over $25,000. We've included the purpose for which the payments were made, just to provide context. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have as a result of the SOPI.
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
I just, excuse me, but I'm just wondering what, it was PW trucks, Greg Gardner Motors, 80,000 plus for PW trucks. Public Works, thank you, if that's correct.
Oh yes, that would have been for the Public Works.
Okay, thank you. I'm just not always up on the acronyms.
Is that the nice new truck with the snowplow?
It would be the snowplow, yes. I'm looking, who's that page to, sorry?
I'm on page
Margaret,
84
turn your
of
road
238.
Page 84.
And it was just this supplier,
Which,
with Greg Gardner Motors Limited.
yes, that would be for, actually, it wouldn't be for the snowplow, that would be for other, I believe we purchased, a truck during the year and we made a down payment for the snowplow, but this isn't for the snowplow, this is for the other public works utilities vehicles. We purchased one for, I believe, the water utilities last year and one for public works.
Oh, yeah.
We had 2 vehicles last year.
Yeah, thank you.
Right.
Yes.
Just something that came up on the sheet there for all the different expenses. You got it in front of you?
For the employees, on the employee expenses?
No, just the supplier and the purpose.
Oh, the supplier one? Okay.
Supplier one. So as far as I can see there, for municipal hall rent was $106,000. The teen center rec studio rent was $27,000 and change. The rent and community school coordinator was $35,000. Now, we take $11,000 out of our community grants to pay for that. So that would result in $24,000 in rent. So all I'm saying is that that comes to a grand total of $157,000. And as far as the community center is concerned, we're using a figure of $127,000 on what we can leverage. So that would be a considerable increase in money. Just saying.
I think for the school coordinator, the 35,000, that would remain because we'll continue to use the school for certain.
That's right. There was a
Oh,
payment.
okay, so
that's
that
part
will
of that.
continue
Is that
on,
the gym
yes.
also?
Yes.
Yeah.
Ah, okay,
The
so
only
that's.
part of
Can't
that
add that
that
part.
we use is the weight room.
Thank you, Kathy.
I was trying to tell that.
But we're still leaving 133, but that's close enough to
We're-
127. I don't have an argument
It's a
with that.
significant amount.
What about renting that little rec center underneath, what's that?
That-
For
I'm
the
just squeezing it
gym
here.
itself.
Yeah.
No, the little, the
gym,
where they
where
have
the
their
gym is.
office
Mm-hmm.
We'll lose that to storage, from what I understand.
for them.
Yeah, whatever, but
Yeah.
what do we pay down there?
That should come out of our calculation, actually.
Yeah, we can break that down.
I'll take a look at that, yeah.
We'll have,
we
we'll
need
have
every
to
dime.
revise the school,
The joint use agreement.
joint use agreement
Yeah.
once we
Yeah.
no longer use that space.
Anybody else have anything? All right, I'll read the recommendation that council approve the 2018 statement of financial information prepared by the chief financial officer and presented to council at the June 24th, 2019 meeting. Thanks, Rob. Any further discussion? I'll ask a question. All in favor?
Oh, I see, that was a seconding, sorry.
Yeah, all in favor? Okay. Moved. Okay, Tyler Ruggles.
I will be presenting on my behalf. I just got some updated photos for you guys.
No,
The photos that were in the report were labeled wrong, so they're incorrect, so I've got some updated photos for you guys. So I'm presenting this on behalf of Tyler, and the purpose of the report is to provide council with some new information regarding the process and associated risks of obtaining a Section 20 letter from Transport Canada for the problem vessels in Manning Bay. Tyler presented at the April 23rd council meeting identifying 4 vessels of concern in the bay. And at that time, council adopted a resolution for staff to proceed with obtaining Section 20 letters from Transport Canada, going through the notification process and applying for funding from the Advantage Boats program. At that meeting, a council member or council inquired into the liability that would be associated with that Section 20 letter, and at that time, staff did not know. Since then, we followed up with Transport Canada, and we've been made aware that once the notification process is done and nobody has claimed the vessels, the municipality would take ownership and assume any responsibility and liability that a boat owner would. So that does open us up to a little bit of risk in between the time of getting a Section 20 letter and becoming the owner and receiving any funding through the Abandoned Boats program. And when I say liability or risk, I mean that, for instance, this is high tide, but at low tide it is pretty much just on the rocks, and, you know, it's summertime, children could climb on it, and if somebody gets hurt, we would be the owner, and we would assume that risk and any claims against us. So that being said, one of the vessels of concern at the time has now been reclaimed by its owner, and the owner is actually occupying the vessel as a live board. Back in April, Violence Services staff and RCMP went out to the bay to do a patrol, and they encountered this individual and served him with a violation notice, and made him aware that he is in contravention of BIB bylaws and the license of occupation. That individual is aware of that, and at this time has no plans to move. So in one of the recommendations, I'll just continue and we'll get to that. So in this report, we've identified 3 vessels of concern that we'd like to deal with as soon as possible. One of the vessels is the beach vessel. The other one is the sunken vessel, which you can see is fully submerged at high tide. And the third is a vessel that is currently still floating, but is definitely abandoned. It's been there for quite some time. So basically, we'd like to rescind the original recommendation, or resolution rather, because there's no longer that 4th boat. We don't really have the ability to pursue the Section 20 letter. There would be no point in seeing that. If we go through the notification, the person would claim it, and it would just be a waste of resources at this time. We would, however, like to pursue the Section 20 letter for 2 of the vessels, the beached vessel and the sunken, and use budgeted funds to dispose of them as soon as possible. And then pursue the Section 20 letter and the funding available through the Abandoned Boats Program for this vessel here, as it poses less of an immediate concern to the bay. So in a nutshell, those are the recommendations: rescinding the resolution from April 23rd, authorizing staff to proceed with Section 20 letter for the sunken and beached vessels, and using budgeted funds, and then proceed with the Section 20 letter and funds to get rid of this vessel.
Allison?
Okay, I got a whole list of questions. Where did the budgeted funds come from? I mean, do we have a line item in our budget for derelict vessels?
Yeah, it's from the vessel, derelict vessel impound disposal budget. We've had it for several years, and it's varied in amounts. And this year it was 9,000. I believe last year it was, I think I
So
sent
this
an
is
email.
a budget line in our.
That's
a line
correct.
item in our.
For this specific
In the
purpose.
pilot, for this, when,
That's correct.
okay, now, we were going to fund a lot of this stuff with charging people for their mooring buoys. So is the revenue from the mooring buoys offsetting that expense line? I mean, what's the revenue from mooring buoys?
I'd have to double check what the revenue is. I believe in Tyler's report from April 23rd, it identified how much we collected in revenue, but I'd have to go back and look.
We wouldn't be able to, by looking at the budget, Allison, make that direct relationship. There may be, I mean, that's a revenue source and we're recording it as revenue. So it may go towards this, but there's no way of identifying specifically that revenue from mooring buoys is going to
No,
pay.
but I wanted to know that we had an offsetting revenue source to this 9,000. Going back to my history pile of stuff, we were told we were going to get revenue from the mooring buoys. I guess I have a real basic problem, and when there's grant money available from the feds, to use citizens' taxpayers' money to pay for something that has none of our doing.
I think that's a struggle we have with staff
And,
as well.
yeah, and I guess my other question is, I thought we paid liability insurance coverage to MIA, so if somebody tripped on our sidewalks or did something wrong fell on the dock or whatever, they looked after it. Is there such a huge deductible or something that there's a liability? And I just can't, I mean, the liability of some kid crawling out on that boat, swimming out to it and jumping off it is just as much as going out on Felipe, or somebody going, hitting the sunk one with a keel or something. But if we've marked them with a marker that says to stay away, then what's the liability?
I'd have to double check with MIA. I'm not super clear on that. I do know that, I'll just have to check with MIA on that.
And I guess the other question is, we had a resolution back in April to apply for the Section 20. Did we not do it?
We did not. We were waiting to hear back from Transport Canada as to what the liability or risk would be involved with.
Is there a
pursuing
fee
that.
for applying for these things? So we could have done it and then pulled it.
It was a matter of staff resources.
And do we apply concurrently for the Section
Correct.
20 letter and the funding?
Yes, we can.
Okay, but none of that was done. And I guess the other thing is, we sent out a notice to the public in 2017, and it said right on here, beginning in 2018, bylaw officers will enforce all provisions of the license of occupation and the use of beaches and water areas bylaw. I think we should go ahead with the Section 20 letter and the application to the federal government for the Abandoned Boats Program. Unless
For all three?
for all three. And then we'll have to have a discussion about what we do about the other one. So vessels 1, 2, and 4, and we'll have a further discussion on vessel 3, but I can't support using taxpayer dollars to get rid of something when there's federal grant funding available.
So we wait till the federal grant funding comes through.
We have
before
made the application, which we should have made back in April, for both of them concurrently, and
No, it wouldn't. It would take about 9 months.
9 months.
how long did it take for the other ones?
It takes anywhere from 4 to 6 months, is in recent history.
And I thought that we couldn't use our money and then reclaim
We
it.
can't.
Oh, so we're not gonna get it back?
No.
If we do the work now,
Yeah.
You can't do the
we
work.
can't get the funding and then we can't be reimbursed. You
Why are
can-
we even applying on it for Section 20 then, for them to pay for it and take it away if we've already done it?
So Section 20 just gives us the
Right.
ownership so that we can dispose of it. We can't go there right now and take those boats away because we don't legally own them. That would be,
Okay, so that's what the Section 20
the
is.
Section 20 there is just illegal, we legally own it, now we can dispose of it.
Yeah.
Is there anything new coming out on the 3rd when all these new rules get promulgated?
So part of the problem, and we put it in a not so nice email to Hope, that when is Bonnie coming back? So when Bonnie left, we were put on pause for parks, and we were put on pause for Manding Bay. And we've thrown staff into the deep end. I'm amazed what Hope has learned and what she's able to
More than
bring
she ever
forth.
wanted to learn,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, but we are hampered from the lack of experienced staff who have dealt with this file, and you know better than anybody else what a complex file this is.
And I have offered help.
Okay, so,
My question is about community safety. That's my concern, is safety on the beaches and kids playing in canoes on the water and that kind of thing. When we receive the Section 20 letters, would we then mark these vessels, or could we mark them now, or are they marked? Like with a danger, stay clear, or a flag on the sunken one, or something. I would just hate somebody's kids to bump into that and tip over into it with sharp metal or whatever there might be.
Yeah, I agree 100%. We could definitely in our next patrol go out there or have a local company go out there and mark them with signage.
Yeah.
Something, and that will be part of the notification process. The vessels do get marked with, with the signage provided by Transport Canada.
Right. I'm hoping that it would be visible and say hazards, stay back, or something like that. And, but I'm gonna leave that's an operational thing. My concern is the safety, so I'm proposing to move this, but I have a couple of little suggestions for the wording. For the first one, where it says proceed with the removal and disposal of the beached and sunken abandoned vessels, can we make it distinct and say the 2 beached and sunken abandoned vessels? because this is ongoing and over the years they pile up. Identified in the report dated June 14th, 2019, just so it's clear when somebody pulls these all up later and is looking at them all, that this was only those two. And so then I'll move it, if people would like, that council authorize staff to proceed with obtaining section 20 letters for the two vessels of concern in Manning Bay, and that upon receiving the section 20 letters, council authorize staff to proceed with the removal and disposal of the two beached and sunken abandoned vessels identified in the report dated June 14, 2019.
Excuse me.
To be funded from the 2019 derelict vessel impound disposal budget. Bless you.
Thank you.
I second that.
Okay.
I'd like to have it severed.
Okay.
Okay? And then, I'm speaking in support of this motion then, it being severed, because I think it's a safety risk, and I also think that currently still floating would be a great name for a band. But anyway, beside the point.
Can I read them as separate?
Yes, please.
May I just ask a procedural question? Do we need to rescind the original resolution?
Yes. We will.
We should do that first.
Let's do
Yeah.
it
If we could do that first. So,
Whereas council,
yeah, go ahead.
Whereas council adopted resolution 19-219 at its April 23rd meeting, directing staff to proceed with obtaining a section 20 letter for each of the 4 vessels located in Manning Bay, and to proceed with applying to the abandoned boats program to fund their removal and disposal. And whereas new information has been presented that puts the municipality at risk of potential liability in obtaining the section 20 letters prior to receiving funding from the abandoned boats program, therefore be it resolved that council rescind resolution 19-219.
Second.
Further discussion on that one? All in favor? Thank you. Allison?
I don't know.
Okay.
So I should
Yes or
favor.
no? Unanimous. And, okay, so we're gonna sever in the next part.
So that council authorized staff to proceed with obtaining section 20 letters for the 2 vessels of concern in Manning Bay.
Can I ask one picky wording point? There's 3 vessels of concern in Manning Bay, so it's 2 of the vessels of concern.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
that's fine. That's what I was trying to do, was clarify which ones.
Why don't you just say all 3? If it's 7.
Because the resolutions are different.
Okay.
All right.
Councillor Bass and Councillor Kale moved and seconded the
Yeah.
initial motion.
I think we'd be prepared to sever. We'll take the first part.
No,
Yeah.
we have no debate
As-
over there.
Okay, all in favor? First part is amended. Thank you. Unanimous.
And the second, that upon receiving the section 20 letters, council authorized staff to proceed with the removal and disposal of the 2 beached and sunken abandoned vessels identified in the report dated June 14, 2019, to be funded from the 2019 derelict vessel impound disposal budget.
Second, Michael?
Yep.
Thank you. Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? 1 in opposition.
I mean, we went for over a year and a half with one on the beach, cement Carroll Hall,
Yeah.
with liability issues, another one down in King Bay, so.
If I could just take a moment to thank Hope for all her hard work on this file.
Yeah, it's incredible.
This is
Thank
under
you.
Tyler's name, but this is Hope's report. And she has done a phenomenal job of me throwing a very large file at her. And it's a difficult file to deal with at the best of times. Thank you, Hope.
Thank you.
And
Yes, thank you.
yeah, I'd like to echo that as well. And I know we'll be asked this question, Hope, and I hate to throw it at you. Given what we've just passed, and I'm really sorry for this, how long do you think it'll take before we can get that particularly dangerous hazard to navigation off the bottom and remove that other one, which sends to me a signal, all derelict boats welcome here, line up on the rocks beside me, permission to lay alongside sort of stuff. What do you reckon the time is reasonably
To get rid of those vessels?
Yeah.
So the notification, so if we contact Transport Canada tomorrow to get this initiated, it could be a couple weeks on their end before we could get it's the
Section
notification process,
Yeah.
and then it's a 30-day period to do for people to be able to claim the vessel.
Oh, you have to wait.
And then, so we're looking at like 6 to 8 weeks. I mean, at the
End of the
most.
summer.
I don't want to set an unrealistic expectation, but that being said, we would like to get on with it to get rid of them as soon as possible because they are a serious eyesore and because one of them is a navigational hazard.
Yes.
Well, we've gone through this process before, and at the end of the 30-day period, somebody has claimed a boat,
Mhm.
so it's.
Which takes,
Granted, that was with a one that was still floating, so we're hopeful.
Yeah.
Well, this is a public meeting, and I hope the people who live around Manning Bay will get some solace from the fact that we are moving on this, because this eyesore has been right in front of their very eyes, and they've been dealing with it for so long. It'll be such a pleasure to say we've actually something to say. But do we actually deal with the other people who seem to have very little interest in complying in terms of being a liverboard? Is that covered under the same one as well?
No, that's a whole different issue.
Is it a separate issue?
Another issue that we are going to continue to investigate options for, mechanisms for better managing and utilizing our properties.
I'm so sorry you've got to spend more time on this.
And this is the third recommendation.
So that council authorized staff to proceed with obtaining a section 20 letter and applying to the Abandoned Boats Program requesting funding for the removal and disposal of the floating vessel Blue Striped currently located in Manning Bay.
I'll move that. Second, David. Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay, unanimous on that one.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Thank you.
You've done a stellar job.
Thank you.
Okay,
Still
so-
sucks, though.
can I just say, in case people are interested, this is happening all over the coast, as you probably know, and Salt Spring has vessels that catch on fire, and they're still there months later.
It's a blight.
And, yeah, so it's not just Bowen, that's all I just wanted to make sure that people know.
Yeah, and they're having equally as hard problems dealing with it. So 9.1, Raj, you're on again.
I didn't realize I was on that item, but there we go. So we had a local area advisory committee meeting with Cove Bay LAC last week, and we were discussing the water treatment plant, and basically the land that the water treatment plant is going to be located on should be coming into the municipality's name very, very shortly, and we're picking up momentum for that project to start moving. The design of the building and the water treatment plant are nearly complete, and they're almost ready to go out to tender. That being said, we need to secure the municipality's funding source for that project, and as a result of that, there's a couple of recommendations here from the local advisory committee to council. First one being that council directs staff, not staff direct council. Council directs staff to bring forward a loan authorization bylaw at the July 8th regular council meeting for the first 3 readings. And the second recommendation is that council directs staff to undertake an alternative approval process to obtain elector assent subsequent to the loan authorization bylaw being approved.
What kind of money are we talking about?
We are, it'll come across in the staff report,
Okay.
but we're looking in excess of $2 million.
So it would be, I think you worked out, it would be $209 per household.
It would translate to about, just over $200 per household per year.
And once we have the Grafton Lake subdivision approved in different phases, that funding that we get from Grafton Lake will help pay down that debt.
There's the Grafton Lake subdivision, and there are other subdivisions that are coming on board as well that would be contributing the equivalent of about $10,000 per lot, but it will come in, that money will come in over time, but it will build up the reserve balances, and usually when you borrow money, you can't pay down debt until the 10th anniversary, but we would have money in reserves to pay down debt at the 10th anniversary. And I'll address all of that in the loan authorization bylaw report.
No, that'll be interesting. I mean, is it gonna cost us anything in the long run what people are gonna wanna know. the tax.
Exactly.
So that average cost, is that per, so an unconnected lot won't pay, but a connected lot will?
I haven't gone down to that level of detail, Allison. All I did is divide the debt servicing costs by the 650 connections that are
Okay, that's
proposed.
That was what I.
Okay, yeah. Thank you for
So you wanna split these recommendations, I guess? So the first one is the council directs staff to bring forward the loan authorization bylaw, July 8th, 2019, regular council meeting for 3 readings. Thank you. Second, all in favor? Thank you. Second one is council directs staff to undertake the alternate approval process to obtain elector assent. Second, all in favor? Unanimous. Now there's another one on the next page. Council direct the communication coordinator to make the educational component of Cove Bay Water Treatment Plant a priority, and that she work closely with the advisory committee on such.
May I just ask, what does
Yeah.
education component mean?
I think it's, we were doing these recommendations on the fly, but it's the getting ready for the AAP process, so getting the material out there. Yeah, to the public, so it's the education of the Cove Bay public as to why we need the water treatment plant.
I always get jittery when I hear educating
Yeah.
the voters.
Yeah,
And we were very careful when we were doing the fire hall referendum not to present stuff as education, but more just as information.
Information, yeah, not education.
Can we say the information?
For sure,
component?
yeah.
I'd be more comfortable with that, just.
Okay, we'll change that to information.
And I guess she's gonna have to work very closely with the director of finance, or whatever the project title is, in order to, we have too many, too many titles, and I can't say Raj. That she worked closely with the finance department as well as.
Yeah, so I think it's working with the Cove Bay Water Committee itself. There was a lot of energy in the room with the Cove Bay Water Committee meeting we had, and I'm glad they decided to stay with us because we need them as our champions in disseminating the information to the public.
But she's gonna need help from Public Works and Finance in order to get that information.
Correct.
So.
She'll do that internally.
We don't
Yeah.
have to pass that taken as a given, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
Why don't we just shelve that whole recommendation? I mean, it'll be a given that our communication coordinator will work with relevant departments
Done.
and the
Yes.
Cove Bay Water Committee.
Thank
Cancel
you.
all the above.
I vote for that.
CAO advice.
So 9.2, Councillor Fast.
Yeah,
Now, we're also gonna integrate 3.3 in there, I've got a little note.
There's two separate resolutions.
well,
The first one.
3.3 was a letter
Yeah.
back in the consent.
Is that
No,
called-
I'm saying, but you've got two different resolutions, only one of them relates to 3.3.
That's right.
Yeah.
The first
So
one.
maybe we should do the simple one first.
Well, I think they are
Is there
interrelated.
anything?
Oh, the park boundaries for Seymour Bay?
Oh, I'm sorry,
And
I'm getting
relationship
mixed.
to- Yeah.
Okay.
3.3, I don't know, this is related to a letter from Diana Taylor.
Yes.
That council referred the replacement of the stairs to access September Morn Beach to the 2020 budget process. I didn't make this recommendation. As I understand it, is it correct that the stairs were taken out by the logs in as part of the winter storms?
December.
That also took out the,
I think so. The stairs were closed by staff at the time.
Got the picture here. This is, I asked
That's
before.
you.
Yeah. I did that deliberately.
Sleeping.
I couldn't resist it.
so,
I couldn't resist it.
so that's what you think, the answer is probably that they went out in the winter, because I know they were closed.
December.
Yeah.
And they were rebuilt last summer, weren't they, when they put the hill
Yes,
down?
yeah. They were rebuilt,
Yeah.
and they were rebuilt quite nicely. When I went down today, the area is a disaster zone, and this very nice lady, Diana Taylor, came up with one or two of the others. You simply cannot walk down there. So please, it's not a major job. Could those steps be reinstated? It is the only beach access for that part. It is a real travesty. It is not such a big deal, by the way. The steps are in essence there. They need to be fixed up and redone. That's one issue.
So my question was about winter storms, which we're gonna be getting more of. And my question is, should we just put them back in, or should we do something different?
Redesign, yeah.
That's better for
Well, Bob,
future?
before he left, and I think his comments may be in here, was what he wanted to do was redevelop the pathway, which I guess was an old logging road
Yes,
or
yes.
something. But that was going to be a cost about 50,000?
Yeah, certified.
10,000? I'm way over there. Yeah, yeah. I mean, what we can do short term is fix the stairs for this year.
Please, please.
And then work on a long-term, more sustainable.
Yeah, because I believe that Mark has video footage of the logs swirling around. Is that the same beach?
I have a video of the stairs being.
Yeah, because I saw that, with the big waves and the swear, and they took away the
That's what I
concrete.
did.
I'm sure, I'm sure,
And,
yeah.
so, this was, I'm glad 3.3 got pulled, because I was going, next year or this year, could we put something to make it, accessible this year?
Yeah,
Yes,
I think if, I
Yeah,
mean,
what's
there has to be a public works budget for maintenance and repairs. So I think if staff be directed to review,
Have a look at it.
yeah, and review available
Value.
funding and the cost to repair the stairs this year.
That would at least
Maybe an
give,
amendment to the financial plan and capital
And there
as
may,
well.
but there
so-
may already be funding in there.
Yeah,
that
we'll take a
because-
look,
Yeah.
yeah.
And this Parks Reserve funds not available for maintenance? And the
We-
Maggie Cummings
Actually,
fund?
as
The
a
thing
good
is-
point, we do have the Parks Reserve Fund, that's
And the
right.
Maggie Cummings fund available for maintenance for trails?
No, the Maggie Cummings Fund is a fund belonging to the Bowen Community Foundation, and we would need to apply for that, pay the other half of that, have it all approved
And what
by
special
now.
projects?
And they want special projects
Yeah.
that Maggie had left instructions about.
So our instructions didn't cover maintenance of
No.
the existing
No.
trails created.
That's right.
New trails.
And so this actually, and I hope you caught that motion there, Hope, because it kind of fits with the second one you'll see under 9.2, which is when we discussed this as the Parks, Trails, and Greenways Advisory Committee. And our chair is here, so maybe you can remind me, Mark, too, if I've got it wrong. But we had also received a letter about these access there at that part, but it requested that a path be cleared on September Morn Beach, which means all those logs. And so what we decided at the committee was to recommend to council to direct staff to create access from the bottom of the trail to the water on September Morn Beach at operational staff's discretion, because we didn't know about budget or anything either. If it's practical and safe to do so, because a lot of those logs are big teetery logs, there's a whole bunch of issues around that, but that large-scale log removal not be conducted.
Is that still in here?
Could I ask that we deal with these as two separate issues?
by all means.
Because as staff, I certainly support the repair of the stairs and the repair of the stairs this year. I do worry about precedent setting of us, of the municipality removing logs from our beach that's not one of our Class A beaches. And just the precedents we're setting with doing that. I get the issue, but I think if we just deal with the repairs first and then move on to the second
Sure,
issue.
okay, it was asked that I do them together, so I did. And,
Well,
but sure,
partly
so,
were related.
Well, they are to a certain degree, they're the
Can
same
I ask
beach.
a question? Because everything we heard from the applicant, or the speakers tonight was, there's no point in fixing the stairs if you don't create an access, because we can't get over the logs and get to the beach.
Can I, because I was down there.
Yeah.
The issue is with those large logs, they are perched, one on top of the other, and they're not in a,
Stable.
well, stable condition. Please, if those great big logs, they sit there and they're pivoting around. It does need some management there. Please, and I hope we've got there, restore the stairs. That would show really willing from council's point of view. Could someone just eyeball those logs and come up with an intelligent recommendation, a practical recommendation to staff here?
It's
So we
an
could look-
outside contractor, so there's costs involved.
Yeah, but I
It's
mean,
not internal staff who can do this.
no, I'm just saying, those logs are big, they're rocking and rolling, And yeah, we can't avoid that, but they are dangerous, just as was stated by the.
Well, the unfortunate thing is if we start doing this,
I
then
know.
we're gonna have to maintain every beach on the island. And it's a tremendous cost. And they're moved in and out all
They
around.
move all around. We could move a whole bunch at some expense, and then they would be back the next week, or another one would
Yeah,
be
next week,
jammed in
another
there.
beach, yeah.
What, we used to have a policy, I don't know if it's still in place, that was, or maybe it's probably just staff operations now, that at the major public beaches, Sandy Beach, Tunstall Bay, Owen Bay, and I can't remember what the new parks plan says now, maybe Cape Roger Curtis, I'm not sure, that we would create a path, which is what we were thinking about here. Could we just create a narrow path? They used to chainsaw through the logs, for example, at the bottom of Sandy Beach, so that people who'd gone down there every year could get through when a big log washed up. That's a different situation at September Morn, and this is why we were, as a committee, advising staff, or recommending to council to direct staff to create an access at operational staff's discretion when it's practical and safe to do so, because those big teetery logs and things, you know, it's safety for the public, there's safety for staff who might have to maintain the access. And it's ongoing.
I agree. Rob?
Just a question, maybe to Kathy. What would be the concern of seeing if those guys can go there with a chainsaw?
Well,
and take out
we
some-
could get somebody to take it would have to be a specialized contractor. It's not our existing staff who would be doing it. One, it's because resources. We only have one parks operation crew, and so it would be a contract. We can find out how much that costs to do something like that.
What if we talk to the
Can I ask a
loggers?
question? I haven't been there or anything, but do those logs have value in them? Like, are they
No.
standard timber, or are they kind of beached and
I would say they're
worn out?
beached and bleached and
Tools,
Oh, okay.
That
The
would be
reason I
my.
was asking was, if they may have been without, I mean, beachcombers can't beach comb logs above the high water mark, but if they were given permission
That
and they
gives
had
you,
value.
that gives you.
This is all the research that Kathy Robertson has been doing over the
Never
past
mind
few
what I was
years. They're salted, they're sanded, they're, you have to pay to get them taken.
Well, she made some comment tonight about there was a place to take them now, which maybe sounded like maybe.
Yes, earlier, all you could do was take them out, let them go, they would either come back to the beach or another
Somebody else's
person's
beach,
beach.
yeah.
She mentioned a contractor. We can certainly get that information from her, get an idea of the cost involved, because I have no idea of the cost involved. So
I think it would be a good idea.
Well, with the steps,
Can't hurt, for
with the
sure.
steps, do we want to ask staff to come back with an estimate as to how much it's gonna cost to fix this, or are we just going to say, do it?
Can I,
Well, no, we're not gonna see.
I mean, one of the things is
I'm talking about the steps.
we have an interim public works manager who is gone the month of July. So it's resources as well. We can certainly put an ad in the paper saying, you know, are you a specialist with removing logs off of beaches? How
No, my question was the steps.
Stairs.
How much is it gonna cost to fix those stairs?
I don't know.
So do we want to ask for proposals to fix them and see what they are before we say, spend the money?
Oh, yeah.
Because my other concern is, we're gonna fix something, and everybody's gonna go down there, and then we're gonna have safety issues as we're trying to get over those logs.
I think at this point in time, we're more responsible for the stairs and repairing those stairs, and then we can deal with the logs. I don't know, maybe one of the loggers on the island will cut a path through there. I mean, those are the best guys to do it, because they understand how logs work, and whether they're gonna roll over you or whatever. And they're very safety oriented. Whether because they'd probably give us the best deal on it, I would think, rather than bringing somebody in from the mainland or another island. So,
that might be the best approach, because in the past few years, correct me if I'm wrong, those of you who have been watching the beach, but I believe there have been lots of logs on the beach for the past bunch of summers, and it's always, as far as I can remember, had lots of logs. Sometimes there are clear patches, but then it would at least put it back to where it was last summer, with the repairs to the stairs, or temporary repairs to the stairs, because
Make it
they are
possible.
related, and it's possible that the logs and storms will come and take it all away again. I had hoped that the work BC Hydro had done would have lasted a little longer, and, because they only did that last year.
The
And,
work BC Hydro done was actually quite helpful in as much that from the road going down that hill is infinitely better than it was. So that bit, at least, is now off the table to some extent. It's quite gravelly, it's slippery still, but it's kind of, it is what it is. It's so that the BC Hydro work has helped. It's just the damage done needs some repair, and because it's a shame not to have this beach usable.
So how are we gonna move forward here? I think we gotta get somebody to price out those stairs and that sort of thing. Start with, what were you gonna say?
I was just gonna read the motion, read a draft motion.
Sure.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's what you want.
Yeah, please
That's
go
a good
ahead.
starting
Give it
point.
a try.
That council directs staff to seek cost estimates to replace the stair access and for the removal of logs for a pathway at September Morn Beach.
Damn, I love you.
I thought you were laughing because you didn't want that.
Can I say, can I just
And report back to
Pretty
council.
simple,
And
isn't it?
report back to
And
council.
report back to council.
And can I just add the words, from the bottom of path, from the bottom of the stairs to the water?
Pathway from stairs to water.
Yeah, that's,
Did you,
We'll give you a chill.
I'll get her done tomorrow morning.
Then I remove that.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion on this? We gotta pretty well beat this up. Okay, I'll ask a question all in favor. Thank you. Done.
Thank you, everyone.
Because that's the first part of it.
Well, that was the second part, actually.
Second
Now
part,
you go
yeah.
back to it.
Yeah, well, so if I could go back to 9.2A, this was regarding Seymour Bay Waterfront Park. And as you may have noticed back when in the consent agenda, our terms of reference as the committee is there. Now I have to look up my computer. And basically, the purpose of the committee, to provide advice to council and or staff on planning for parks, trails, greenways, and outdoor recreation opportunities. So, watching Seymour Bay Park over the years, there have been trees removed, the land has been recontoured, huge storm drain has been installed. There's slumping now, there's invasive plants getting established, like soon it could be way more blackberry than is there now. There's a hardened foreshore at the bottom of the slope, then the rocks are beginning to shift, and from what I assume was the winter storms, anyway, they've moved since last year. And but now we've got a new parks plan, and we want to provide advice about Seymour Park. There are struggling plantings that have been planted before, kind of wasted effort. The poor little plants are dying out, roses in that case. And so the committee wants to do its duty, which is to provide advice to council and or staff on planning for parks. This little park, in order to make a plan for it, we need to know where the edges are. And they're kind of gone. All the stakes from 20 years ago, 15 years ago, or whatever are missing. The trees are missing, the landmarks are changed, and we don't know where the edges are. So this is a request for the edges to be found again, the boundaries, and make them more visible. We think that iron pins are still in the ground. And also that a sign be erected showing a map of where the park boundaries are. And so that people know that it's not just part of the big development down there, that it actually is a park. And more of it is a park than just the little stairs and the beach. It's quite a bit bigger park. So that is our recommendation from council, from the committee to council.
Maureen?
I don't have a problem with locating the survey pins. I mean, I think that's valuable for the purpose of park planning. But do any of our other parks have maps erected showing the boundaries?
Corn Park does, Headwaters Park does, yeah. They're maps inside on kiosks, yeah. They're,
That's it.
It's just I don't recall seeing it.
sometimes we have done that in the past with new parks, so people know where the edges are. I think there's one at Evergreen as well. Yeah. So that people know where they can go and where the trails are and that kind of thing. It doesn't have to be there. That was the committee's
Do we
recommendation.
have any money in the parks budget?
In the parks budget, I'll have to, I can take a look and report back to council.
because that's gonna require a survey.
Well, no, it's to
metal pins.
find the metal pins with the metal fibers.
Surveyor has to do that.
Weed whacking some
No,
of
it's
the
all
potatoes.
pretty well beaten down
Yeah, yeah,
and
it is.
bare.
It's
It's
a metal
bare.
potato.
Yeah.
But that's,
This is part of the challenge, there's been, you know, the brick, the land has been reconfigured, though it might be, some of them might be missing. We just don't know.
I would have thought originally that I was one questioning why we actually had to define the boundary, but I do believe that the top end of it has to be defined very well. I think it goes right over on the south side, it goes right to the edge of the land.
The water, yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
Well,
To the
I
water's
would call it
edge.
the south side.
We can call it the water's
You
edge.
could call it the west side if you wanted to. And on the east side, obviously, it's that bridge going across to the other.
Well, I don't know where on the bridge it is. I think it's actually partway up the slope, just a little bit, but I
Yeah.
don't know exactly where. But what, it's hard to manage or make a plan for a park. when you
Anyway,
don't know.
it's some point in the future, we're gonna have to define that park, so we might as well get on with it and see, and make it happen.
But if it hasn't been budgeted for this year and it's a significant budget, then
Well,
maybe
it's-
it needs to go forward.
What if we,
Survey for 3
if we
months,
have
looking right now.
the council direct the Parks and Environment Coordinator to research current survey pins and report back to council if a survey is required?
Mhm.
That would be
Yeah,
good.
set the ball in motion.
I'm with
Yeah.
that.
Okay. Second, Michael, all in favor? Thank you. I love when it gets late.
And leave the pond till we find out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And, so are you happy with that then?
I moved it.
How about the map? Wait till we find the
Oh,
pins
yeah, sure, that can wait.
first. Okay.
This was the recommendation from the committee, and the council can do whatever we want.
Okay, so let's move on to new business then. Union BC Municipalities Annual Convention.
I circulated an email to council last week regarding UBCM and how it is coming up. Let me just pull up my little thing here so I've got all my bits. So in essence, in past, we have had the opportunity to request meetings and then at a later date provide a briefing report with a detailed list of topics, etc. They are changing the way they do things, that everything is on an online platform, and at the time of requesting a meeting, we need to provide detailed information with who would like to attend and the topics with detailed fields. So that being said, we need to do this sooner rather than later. The request deadlines are July 17th for meetings with the cabinet ministers and the minister of housing. So Kathy had suggested doing a workshop in advance of the July 8th meeting to flesh out. So basically, I want everyone to go home and review the provincial appointment book and see who you'd like to meet with and
write your one-liner.
what their ministry covers. And yeah, and in the email and in my little briefing, just the information that you need to bring to the meeting, just what you'd like to discuss, background, any reports that we have, or anything you want to include in there as links or attachments, and then what your preference order would be for meeting with that ministry or that provincial staff.
I don't understand that preference order one. Is it preference for dates or?
Preference, like priority. Like when housing,
What's your highest priority?
What's your
for
highest
meeting?
So we
priority
have
for
for
meeting?
3 meetings with 3 different ministers, we've got to rank those 1, 2, 3.
yeah, it's all through the same online platform. It's so big all.
So if it's a high priority, they're gonna try to work it in more than a low priority.
But having this detailed information is going to help us get meetings.
Yeah.
So the more
Sooner
detailed
the
they
better.
can be, the higher the likelihood we're gonna get these meetings.
And sorry about I exited to turn on the heat.
I know,
Is the intent then is we're gonna discuss this at the July 8th?
That's what I said,
Okay.
just as you had left.
Good.
So this is just the information I'd
Yeah.
like everyone to bring to that meeting so that we can flesh it out and
Or
then
maybe
I
I
can.
can circulate in advance, and so we can kind of pull
Yeah,
together
or
that's where the
circulate in advance.
commonalities are.
I can follow up with an email with a deadline for getting this information, if that's more helpful for everyone, having a hard deadline.
So those attending would just be us, right? CAO, we're not.
That's correct. Last I checked, I didn't get
Sorry
invited.
about that one. Now, when it says brief topic title for each, so we can have 3 different topics with
You
each
can have
ministry,
3 different topics per request,
per ministry request.
per ministry request.
Okay.
Just for continuity, do you have a list of the ministers that we
It's
saw last
That's
year?
it's in the little
It's in the-
report and it's in the email I sent. It's the provincial appointment book. That
It
has
was
all
last
the
year's,
minutes-
our last year's
No,
one?
Michael,
No,
there's a
it's
link
this
in-
year.
This year.
No, but I just wondered, do we have a list of the ones we actually did last year? Whatever, very simple.
Yeah,
We-
I can give you a
Just
list of those.
because there's some continuity,
I agree.
those are the ones that we did last year. Let's just have a look at that because, you know, let's, before we jump onto a new ship here, let's just see
I
where
can
we
send
were with
out-
the old ones.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
can send out the topics
I
that were
would- I
requested
would
for last year and the ministries.
personally find that very helpful because we will remember the ones which we thought was just a polite exchange and the ones where we felt we maybe gained a little more traction with our winter tires.
Or the ones where we didn't get anywhere, we need to have a second kick at the can.
Rural status, yay.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yep. Or maybe we want to say thank you to someone.
it's a lovely idea.
Yes. Just goes a long way sometimes.
So that is all. I just wanted to raise it
No, you.
to everyone in the same room at the same time
Thank you.
with a
Very
plan
good.
for moving forward.
None of us got back to you.
You're totally innocent. The culprits are before you.
David, Metro.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, I've got a few things. First of all, there was a June 10th letter from Chair Dollawall about the MK Delta lands, asking if want to provide any input to that. I imagine we don't, but if anybody does, I have information on that. I'm seeing none, so I'll move on.
Okay, good.
Here they are, next.
The Climate Action Committee, I'll report on there was 3 really interesting reports. The first one was implementation of the carbon price. So the Metro Vancouver has a shadow carbon price that they use for business analysis,
Okay.
$150. So this is for things that are, you know, if you're doing long-term infrastructure, that's the price one could expect over the years.
Yeah.
And so they had several case studies of where they actually use this, and really interesting. They were all interesting, but one I'll just mention. Probably a lot of you know about the Lonsdale Energy Corporation. That's the that they use natural gas to heat 75 buildings at the bottom of Lonsdale. Well, they did the analysis of the new sewage treatment plant, taking the heat out of the new sewage treatment plant. I think it was about a $20 million, $18 million project. But with the carbon tax, it made money. It made it valuable to do.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was a go-ahead for that project. So it was just a business plan, a business assessment approach using an expected price of carbon over the long term. Kind of thing. So it was really interesting. They did it for their fleet acquisition as well, and they should moving to zero emission vehicles and so on. So that was really cool.
Yeah.
Another one that Mark would be interested in is best management practices for invasives, and there was a whole bunch of invasive species, and they've done 11 different species, and it's a really interesting report with lots of pictures of what these plants look like. They dealt with in this report it was an ivy, which is all over my yard, and a holly and a bunch of other things. But in earlier ones, hogweed, broom, fire ants. So if, there's all kinds of great information on what these things look like, what you should do with them, where you should dispose of them, and how you should not try to dispose of them, and so on. So that was really interesting. The other one, and some people would be really interested, I was very interested, this is carbon storage data set. So they used detailed high-resolution mapping to understand the carbon storage of soils, forests, and wetlands of the whole region, including, of course, Bowen Island. And they actually come up with data looking at the carbon storage of different plots of land all over Bowen. So you can actually see the amount of carbon that you would be releasing if you develop this property, or that you would be protecting if you protected the property, sort of thing. And if you put that $150 carbon price on it, a hectare of forest becomes very, very valuable indeed. So that was really interesting. That combined with the week before, or the month before, one on a similar mapping of sensitive ecosystems right across the region, looking at Bowen as well. So you can actually, our planners will be able to look at sensitive ecosystems and carbon storage in quite detail right across Bowen. So it's really quite interesting stuff.
So how do we get access to that?
Yeah, that's right.
I'll send you the report, both reports.
Were they in the Metro board meeting or?
No, it will be in the meeting. There's a meeting this week. I presume it'll be in the meeting this week, but it was on the Climate Action Committee about 3 weeks ago, something like that. that.
If
And
you
then
could
like-
send it, that would be great.
It's great information. I asked, okay, can planners get this information? And yes, they will be sending it all out, so. One other thing, I went to, Metro sent me on a conference down in Portland last week on, it was called the Roadmap Conference on e-mobility, electric mobility. And it was interesting just being in Portland and moving around. I've never been there before on trains. See you, Raj.
See you, Raj.
You know, get from the airport to a hotel and downtown and so on, all by electric trains. It was really quite great. And then little scooters all over the place, electric bikes, and you know, for rent and so on, with just your card and so on. But anyway, the conference was really interesting, and it was an area that I'd really not focused on a whole lot. And one of the things that's really kind of important is that and I'll be bringing some report to council on this, but to get to the new IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change recommendation of 1.5 degrees, it means we need to be at zero carbon by 2050. By zero carbon, like before it was sort of 80%. Well, 80%, okay, what does that mean? You could have something here, something there, but zero carbon by 2050 means zero emissions from transportation. That means any car that's left, any bus that's left, they got to be electric, zero emission electric. And in BC, of course, because of our low carbon electricity, it's a huge advantage for us. And I guess I thought going in, what did I know about this? Almost nothing going into the conference. So I learned all about the charging and the fast charging and all that kind of stuff, DC charging, all the stuff that I didn't know. And it's really quite fascinating because I was trying to understand the role of municipalities and the role of regions. Because I figured, well, buying an electric car is just a personal decision. But there's quite a lot you can do. And a lot of the conversation because here's how it works. You've got the utilities on one side that provide electricity. You've got the car companies on the other side that make cars. And then all in between, the charging systems, the different makes of charging systems, the information involved in them, the communication between them, how they price, and all that kind of stuff, it's all the private sector. So the private sector can do all that, and the way it does it can really affect how easy it is for people to use electric cars and so on. So on Bowen, it's not such a big deal because most people can do it at their home, but not everybody. You know, if you're in an apartment that doesn't have, you know, a plug down on the ground and you want an e-car, and that's one of the really important things for the conference is electric cars, especially if you can buy used ones, and used ones are starting to become available. There's a cheaper way to get around than a gas car because their maintenance is way lower and the fuel costs are way lower. But if you live in an apartment building, how are you supposed to be able to charge it up? So you need to have chargers put in places that are around places where people live so they can do that. And what are fueling stations like? Like Shell actually bought one of these systems, but what they're pointing out is that fueling stations aren't like old gas stations because you don't want to spend 20 minutes at a gas station. So the fueling stations should be at shopping centers, at community centers, at libraries, and so on. Places,
They're a good
restaurants. So at places where you want to spend 20 minutes or an hour, sort of thing. And so that's the private sector involved to some degree, or the municipality or the region and the zoning and so on. So anyway, I will be writing a report on this. It'll go to Metro Vancouver, and when I do that, I'll send it to you. But it was fascinating conference. I learned a whole lot that I was astonishingly ignorant about. You know, all the work that we just did on our charging stations, I barely knew the difference between level 1, 2, and 3. I'm glad we're doing level 2. It's obviously what happened to do. Anyway, more to come on that.
Did you check out the food carts?
No, I didn't. The only thing I did, I only had a tiny little bit of time off on the last day, and I went to the best bookstore I've been to in a long time.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody knows that bookstore?
It's still there.
Powell's.
Still there.
Yes, Powell's.
Powell's.
Oh,
Yeah.
incredible bookstore.
Yeah.
Three
Yeah.
floors of.
3 floors. What's that?
Did you go to the Nike store?
No, I didn't have any time to do anything except on that last night.
It's a beautiful city.
Yeah, it really is a lovely place. Yeah.
Flat.
Okay, that's it for me.
Great.
All right, thanks, David. And Sue Ellen and Michael, Islands Trust update. See you, Mark.
Did you want to
No,
report?
go ahead.
Trustee Kale? Okay, I will report, we just got back from Galliano Island last week for Trust Council. It was a very interesting Trust Council. You've got a bunch about it in your package. I think there 12.4C is the agenda, if you'd like to see that. You'll see also in 12.4 the climate change emergency that the Islands Trust has declared, and then at this Trust Council we received a report and directed staff to go ahead and make a sort of strategic plan and fit it into our strategic plan, like what can the Islands Trust actually do to mitigate and adapt to climate change. You'll see in the package that Islands Trust has referred the policy statement engagement to us. After 25 years or something, it's time to look at the policy statement that is like the OCP of the Islands Trust, is how I look at it.
Yeah.
And maybe it's time for an update. So it's taking, Trust Council is bringing that out to all the local islands, including Bowen Island. So it's there, and maybe at the next council meeting, hope I'll ask council for feedback on the questions in there, like what kind of engagement would be good for us. We want an event or something online or at the farmer's market or something. And so remind me when we get there. 45 years of the Islands Trust, like the ALC, the Agricultural Land Reserve. The Islands Trust was set up 45 years ago. And here we are now with over 100 nature reserves and you know, still having success in protecting the Islands Trust area, which runs from, I won't go into all that. Well, there's another thing in our agenda about the Coast Guard and their towing capacity for big vessels, relates to oil spills and to all those vessels that are kind of parked now. There's anchorages along through the Gulf Islands
Yes.
that big shipping, container ships are using. It's kind of a free parking for international shipping. And it relates to harbors being a little overcrowded, but it's also dangerous in the kinds of storms we've had. Like these big container ships are in there just offshore, shining their lights and running their engines all night too, which relates to, yeah. And of course they're supposed to do that because they're vessels in navigation, so you don't want to crash into them. No other vessel wants to crash into a big one that way. I just wanted to flag with you that I did bring up the topic of electrifying the ferry fleet that we passed at our last meeting was on council's agenda. They didn't, I don't think it really made it into the Islands Trust strategic planning, because we did that as a big exercise, breaking up into small groups and all that kind of thing with the 26 of us. The information that some trustees who are local, whatever that, Ferry Advisory Committee chairs was saying it's already on the radar, we don't have to make it a priority, that kind of thing. But stand by, because if we want to ask them again, if we want their help, we can ask them in September, because that's when Trust Council is coming to meet here on Bowen Island, the week before UBCM. So we have a chance to meet them and talk to them, ask them again if we want to, invite them to come with us to go meet with BC Hydro, which Peter Luckham did come with us last year, for example, to say, let's get the power lines down to Horseshoe Bay expeditiously, right? Those kinds of things. And, but they were paying attention. It was a very busy agenda, and strategic planning, there's about 40 topics and we need to whittle it down to like half, so we'll see where we go from there. I wanted to flag too that the main part of the Bowen tax levy analysis has been done, and that's page 215 in the agenda that's there.
Yeah.
And the main conclusion of our Chief Administrative Officer, who happens to be a former KPMG auditor and whatever that word is that means you go in there and figure out what the problem is, kind of auditor.
Forensic?
Yes, thank you. That's exactly what she's called, or she was called. Based on the above analysis, she crunches through all the numbers here and looks at a bunch of tables so you can see how Bowen compares to the other islands and this kind of thing. And basically, based on the above analysis, it does not appear that the municipal levy calculation is generating inequitable levies for municipalities in the trust area when compared with the federation-wide levy for the other local trust areas. This analysis makes the assumption that expenses are correctly allocated between the various areas of function and service within the trust budget and is being applied appropriately. So she's got one more stage of, one more phase of the analysis to do. So you can see they're doing a deep dive on this. So the last one, she's going to look at, she's already done the first couple now, and the last one will be to assess whether the expenditure allocations are appropriate between federation-wide services, like we are part of, and everything from advocacy to nature reserves or the tax exemption program, those kinds of things. And local planning services that we're not involved in to ensure that equitable allocation of funds is being applied to an appropriate pool of funds, and if required, develop more appropriate options for calculating the municipal levy as directed by the Financial Planning Committee. That's the motion I made way back in November or something, ensuring any options developed are in keeping with the legislative requirements of the Islands Trust Act. So,
Sue Ellen, will that be part of the agenda when the Islands Trust comes to
Yes.
visit us in September?
I
The full
believe,
report?
well, I'm not sure actually, whether that third part will be then. Do you remember?
Well, I did speak to, may I just,
Yeah.
did speak to Peter Luckham on that, and yeah, I think on page 219, for those who are following it, it's a follow-up, the one that Sue Ellen just read, to say start to complete the final step of the analysis, contemplate options to
Oh, yes,
amend the
there it is.
municipal tax calculations appropriate, etc., etc., etc. So yes, it certainly will be. One item that did cheer me somewhat is that we made the point at a couple of meetings ago that none of their meetings, unlike our open meetings, are recorded. And I know they're going to start to look at actually recording their meetings. I mean, they face some technical challenges. I mean, it's Ireland, it's not like we are here, but they are definitely going to face that, and that's something we put home, and to say to you, really, people need to be able to see what goes on in these meetings, not just to get the minutes.
Well, it took 10 years to get them to post the agenda.
Well, yeah. I have to say, I gained an appreciation. Peter Luckham is an experienced chair. Now, around this table, you've got 26 trustees and the CAO. Now, in fairness to Peter, this is a real challenge. I mean, if you were being unkind, you might call it dysfunctional, but that would be being unkind. It is extremely difficult. Try to imagine if we were 26 councillors, mayor and CAO, right? It is extremely, and I say Peter is an experienced chair, does his best job, but it does mean these meetings are very prescribed. And I think there was some genuine attempt to try and open it up and get some areas of conversation, because now I've up my third meeting, I got to know the people individually, as you do, and as you didn't when you first walked in the room, and you're learning more about really what they're thinking. And I would say they're quite a spirited group of trustees, because by no means there's a consensus on every single point. Rather like this council isn't always unanimous, and that's just the way it goes. Well, there were some interesting votes cast at this meeting, which also weren't unanimous, and I think that's very healthy, because there certainly are divergent opinions, and I think they're going to come to the surface more and more. As I say, I think this is really healthy. They're a spirited group, and I think that's excellent. It might cause some discomfort to the chair trying to marshal this huge meeting, because if everyone is truly spirited, it's going to be a nigh impossible. However, it was, in my way, I mean, some of it is such a large agenda, and 26 people trying to battle their way through a strategic plan, quite frankly, is, maybe it's the only way it can be done, but it's tough going, right? Certainly sent me to sleep. It really is, I mean, hour after hour of this stuff, focus is difficult. So I take my hat off to the chair. I think he did what any one person can do. And I think some of the new voices on the Islands Trust will make themselves felt and make themselves known. So yeah, it was a good news. And we are host in September.
that's right. So this is what I wanted to bring up. For those of you who do look at the report in detail, I just found my notes from Julia here. Basically, her report, starting on page 215, is an attempt to compare apples to apples.
Yes.
As she described it, tables 1 to 3 brings to where you can do the comparison, apples to apples. Table 4 is the one, if you're going to look at one table, where it shows you that Bowen is not that different. So you can see comparable islands, we're not really an outlier. And so in an attempt to respond and make the meetings more engaging and better for trustees, some of whom leave early on the last day, right, Michael?
Absolutely.
Then,
Off like a rocket.
But we're going to be on Bowen only 2 days of meetings in September. So Hope, I particularly wanted to let you know that next meeting of Trust Council will be held on Bowen September 18th and 19th.
So what's
2
happening?
long days. And so that's the plan. So instead of a half a day, a long day in the middle and half a day, the plan is to have 2 long days, the 18th and 19th. So I don't know if you need to know that or whatever, but I just wanted to flag it with you.
Where are they gonna be held? Just out of curiosity.
They usually
Normally
do
takes
Hill
that
Chapel.
Yeah.
Usually, yeah. And
Accommodation.
So looking at the agenda that's in the package,
mhm.
it's got Tuesday, September 15th, Wednesday, September 18th, and Thursday, March 15th. So, and it's got dinner.
March.
Yeah, it's got 3 days.
Which
Well, this
page
is
are you on?
I'm in the draft agenda that was the very last item on the the last council meeting, because I went to look to see what.
Mark, we
So
Well, the
there's
agenda-
been some cut and pasting problems here.
Well, the agenda that's on 12.C or whatever, yeah, C is
I
the
looked it
agenda.
up and I just scrolled at the bottom and.
So
Well, we
get
changed the dates
clarification.
anyway,
Yeah.
September 18th to 19th, 2019.
So 20th is now scratched.
And this will be an opportunity for members of BIM Council to come and see how it happens, come and meet us at meal times, get to know people, see how council works in case you want to run next year and next term. And I think it's a chance too to find out where we are with our strategic plan. We should be finalizing that, so then we can see where the areas of commonalities are, and then we go to UBCM the following week. And perhaps we'll find ways to work together.
So in past, when trust councils come to meet on Bowen, they have actually had a meeting with Bowen Council as part of the trust council meeting. So is that not planned then for this
I
time?
think because we came in March, I don't think we thought that it would be necessary within such a short time to have another meeting. And
Yeah.
because trustees were looking for a fast-paced, slimmed-down meeting, and then we'll have a few online meetings in between with staff reports and some of the drier materials.
And then the other question was, in past, they have also had invited council to join them for one evening for dinner.
I imagine they would do the same.
So you don't know whether that's planned or not?
Because we just changed the dates on them a few days ago, I don't know any of those details yet. They usually invite former trustees as well.
Well, that was the other question, was often the same.
Yes.
item. But, so it's just a matter of letting people know so they can mark it down.
Maureen?
That's what I'm trying to do.
So I've got a question concerning the Islands 2050 engagement plan and the Islands Trust policy statement. Is this one small piece of the work that's being done on this Islands 2050?
Yes,
And
it's
I'm
phase
asking
one.
it is because it's solely focused on First Nations engagement. And
It's,
doesn't seem to be any broader discussion of other issues.
we're breaking it into phases. Our Islands Trust staff, like staff here, has full-time work, and this is on top of that. So the project has been tried to get going a couple of other times and hasn't got off the ground, basically because other things come up. And so the attempt here is to follow our own reconciliation plan and engage, because First Nations weren't included in the act or in the original policy statement that we had to interact with them, and yet there are 30 separate nations or something like that in the trust area. So this was to be a attempt to do outreach to First Nations as well as all the newcomers on all of the islands. Bowen has a lot of new people since the Islands Trust was part of Bowen everyday life, and so do many of the other islands. So this is by reworking the introduction part and the definitions and some of those things that have to be done, it's a chance to get the idea is that it's a chance to get citizens understanding and engaged with the process so that they can make informed input in this next phase, which will be the body of the policy statement, or more parts of it, unless we break it up into more pieces.
And we'll deal with what? Are the phases sort of, are they labeled, or do they have a specific
We've
focus?
got to look at the agenda packet.
I think we're gonna have to move on if we're just about done with the trust. We've got almost 20 minutes.
I'll talk about it at the next council meeting, how about
Yeah.
that?
Sure.
Yeah, okay, so can you put me on to talk about that? Thank you.
Thanks, Simone. Okay, Maureen.
Nothing to report.
Okay, that talks so long. Allison.
Okay, two things. On the upcoming meeting on Friday for the Mayor's Council, there's a full report, and the agenda, public agenda is on the Translink website, on interurban passenger rail, which answers all the questions. Yes, and that's being presented on a public meeting. And the other thing that's coming forward is a report on road, bike, walk, and cost share funding. And that's also on the public agenda. And they're going to, for small municipalities, without jumping to that page, which is going to take me forever to scroll down 19 pages, it will, basically, they'll fund 3/4 of the costs for bike and walking for little communities like us. And the base funding won't be, they allocate the funding right now on the basis of population and expected and work population. So there was some interesting numbers on Bowen work population in a previous background document.
I'm sorry, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Well, it means our population and work population compared to everybody else is peanuts. So if they allocated it on just that population, we get diddly squat. Now we're gonna get a minimum allocation, $40,000. So it's much like what we argued for 6 or 8 years ago with the gas tax funding. So it's good news. So I'll get the report circulated after Friday when I know it's just for information, so it's basically what Translink will be taking to their board, so it's good news. So we'll get some guaranteed funding. Some of it's project-based, so you have to apply, others is just base funding. So, and we've done very well in getting, funding so far. But this is better because we only have to put up 25% instead of 50%.
Yeah, that's a big deal.
So that's good.
If only we had the 25%.
That's good.
So that's it.
Okay, well, thanks, Allison. And Rob, you wanted to talk about
Yeah, I gave a
the
quick little.
active transportation.
Yeah, so I sent out by email a bit of an update. I was
Yeah.
sort of just picking little things that I felt would affect Bowen Island the most. But I went to the BC Active Transportation Summit, June 17th, 18th, at the Edmonds Center. Really tons of excitement. It was sold out right away, and Squamish, Seashell, and then the whole lower mainland with their mayors, staff. So tons and tons and tons of energy, which was really interesting to see. During the conference, Minister Trevino was there as a transportation minister to make an announcement. There were no specific money, like this is how much money we're going to throw at active transportation, but there were some interesting sort of policy directions that they're moving forward with. So a couple of them. One was to extensively go through the Motor Vehicle Act, and hopefully we'll change the name of that, but a lot of issues with these new types of transportation, e-bikes, and especially in the States with those stand-on electric scooters that are just like, I couldn't believe the
Stockless.
like, yeah, within like a year and a half, they went from 0 to like they're everywhere. So just making sure that the Motor Vehicle Act lines up with our ability to have these types of mobility, new mobility moving forward. Interesting, the Bike BC grant program, and I think we got money for the bike barn, but also the Cross Island
Yes,
Path.
correct,
That kind of-
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so they're gonna be expanding that program, and they were sending out a lot of signals that if you're doing multi-use paths and all that, there's gonna be a lot of funding moving forward. So they're gonna expand that, continue it, probably even grow it. So really good with us doing our multi-use path right now because I know Gary brought up too, like how do we roll this out down the road?
Yeah.
And I think there's gonna be funding for that, which is great. A big one, I'm encouraging end of trip facilities, so sort of the bike barn sort of is a nice sort of little example that we can use of what we're doing. Active transportation design guide, so that's, it's a 700-page new design guide that's been, and I think the company that Urban Systems produced that. And the idea here is that there's like a hodgepodge of all different design standards that came up at the width. So they're trying to get some consistency going, and every municipality doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. So they got this full-on design guide. Emma knows about it. So any kind of sort of active transportation facilities we meet, there'll be a best practices example there that we can go off of instead of trying to make it up on the fly as we go.
So a question,
Those
yeah,
are the line
follow up
standards.
on from transit side is because the regional cycling program and walking access to transit program, hopefully, I should be making sure that their standards align with.
Oh, I am.
Which I'm fairly sure they probably.
And transit was all over that meeting, yeah, they had,
Yeah.
so, yeah. A bit about aligning provincial and municipal policies, and that's been a bit like the speed limits and all that stuff in the MVA, so making sure that. And a lot of talk about network planning to connect communities, so a lot of talk about paths, like there was a presentation on the Blue Heron Trail, which goes from the Tuason Band. They're trying to connect it to the Spirit Trail on North Van, which then we can try to connect to our trail. So our ability to sort of help form those connections was a really big spot. Both the city of North Van and West Van are going to be piloting a rental electric bike program. So, and they're dockless, so you can just, they're not, you don't have to set them, but they're going to do that for the summer.
Yeah.
So 300 for North Van, I don't know how many West Van. I don't think it's going to go to Horseshoe Bay yet, but they're just piloting it out and seeing.
So they'll be all GPS equipped that you can just leave them wherever you want.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's awesome.
yeah, it's sort of hard to fathom, but they work, they're all over the place, so it's,
Whereas the Vancouver ones are fixed.
Here in Dawson.
they're docks,
Yeah.
yeah, so you have to drop them off at a certain location, so. Yeah, I think that was, it was great, I think Emma going there next year would be great, I know
Yeah.
she was busy this year, but she would have been totally in, like, with tons of plans.
Encourage her to go next year,
Yeah.
for sure, yeah.
So, good.
Awesome, thanks, Rob.
One of the things, sorry, Urban
Yeah.
Systems mentioned, because I knew they were involved with the work at the provincial level, is for trails in rural municipalities where the trail width is challenging, the province has narrowed the width from 3 meters to 2 meters. So that from 3 meters to 2
Oh,
meters.
that's good.
Yeah.
That's considerable.
Yeah, so our engineer right now is checking to see if that would be applicable for the multi-use pattern.
Oh, I can't see why it wouldn't. We're rural
I
now.
thought I read something like that.
I think the one big message was that there are so many different modes of transportation, like, nobody would have guessed electric scooters 2
No.
years ago, right? So having that into consideration, I remember when rollerbladers came out and it was like a gong show on bike paths, we gotta think like what's moving down, like 3-wheeled scooters and all that kind of stuff.
Covered
That-
this.
well, so we don't need to build a path.
That's right. We're moving way too fast.
Being up out here,
Thanks, Rob. Okay, 10.7, somebody,
That was me.
was it, who was it?
That was David.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll be quick, So a week or so ago, I sent everybody a link to the new website for the Road Transportation Society. Yeah, and so I had a meeting this morning with Julian Barrera, who is now the
Yeah.
executive director, great guy. And so they now have 45 members, including some members of this council. He didn't say who was, but that's great.
Yeah.
And $100 a membership, that's so that, they're getting their money. And so the AGM is July 3rd at 6 o'clock at the library. But after that, he's got pretty strong plans. He wants to come back and inform council again. So we'll be sending a note to Hope asking for another presentation, just an update of where they are and where they're planning to go and what's happening with them. Okay?
Awesome.
Yeah.
Boy, that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. 10.8, I've got NSC, what is
North
that?
Shore Congress.
North Shore Congress, there you go.
That was last Wednesday, and it was at the, Swale, long,
Oh, yeah.
longhouse, beautiful, new.
Oh, incredible
meeting
building.
venue. It's absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
The traffic to get there was totally, absolutely awful. But once we got past the.
Electric scooter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would help. So maybe the new things will help, but anyhow, it wasn't as good as some of the past ones have been, but there were two presentations made, and Dr. Bashir made a presentation on the determinants of social and environmental determinants of health, and a lot of it, they sent the slides, so I would send them around to everybody. You know, what makes Canadians sick, and it's your life, your health care, mostly your life, your health care, your biology, and your environment, and then we talked a lot about climate change impacts, and mainly it was the quality of the air, and then there was another presentation by a fellow who, his name has gone out of my head, who was the Alex Boston, Executive Director at Climate Center, and he gave a presentation on the changing demographics in our cities, and very much pushing for laneway housing, turning large houses into suites. And part of it was for seniors. He had a new term, and Sharon Thompson and I were looking at it. Cities are being hollowed out.
Yeah.
And hollowed out is, when we grew up in West Van, there were 4 and 5 kids in the family, 4 or 5 people in the family living in the house. Now, that same house, the kids have moved away, dad's died, mom's there, and that's it, sort of thing. And so that's what they mean by hollowed out. And so you've got seniors living in isolation in these great big houses that maybe can't get out. You've got people needing housing, seniors needing companions, and Colleen was out of session last week on the West Van starting up or the North Shore, a registry for seniors who would be willing to have boarders or something. Anyhow, there was a lot of talk about that and finding housing and everything. And keeping from a dollars and cents perspective, if you do the infill, or you allow secondary, detached secondary, it was amazing the different terms everybody had for them, then your cost of capacity for piping, for sewer and water, and all that stuff goes down, because it's already in the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, so anyhow, I'll send around the slides, because it's quite interesting. And it was, it was an interesting time to chat and catch up with a few people, but the lady from the North Shore Emergency Response Committee was very complimentary to the work Jen was doing.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was good.
All right, so I think we've got one other item, or did we deal with that?
Oh, 12.12.
12.12.
Yes.
We got that 3.2 done.
Yeah, 3.2, I think, we could reintroduce it, but I think we've dealt with it.
No, I think we've,
So 12.12 is an extremely important item.
12.12, yes.
It's the slug crosswalk.
I know.
Proper slugs.
To get the proper slugs, to get Oscar's slugs redone. So it's a letter from Sam Knowles, offering her services and Oscar, who designed the crosswalk, and asking could they please be involved when they are repainted this
Yeah,
year.
I should put that in your correspondence, I realize that.
I flagged that for Kevin Taves, our.
Excellent.
Oh,
And
did
he
you?
said that it's coming up and he was aware of it and that he was gonna look into it.
Well, why don't we make that an official recommendation, so it doesn't.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, formal invitation.
That staff recommend, no, that council recommend. It's too late for me to read them all off the top of my head.
Let Hope knows what the recommendation should be.
Yeah.
Your question.
The council direct staff to follow up with the correspondence from Sam Knowles dated.
How about that, council requests that staff work with Sam and Oscar Knowles, I think Oscar has a different last name.
Decker.
Yeah, Knowles Decker, to refresh the slug crosswalk
Painting.
And then we can talk, I'm meeting with Kevin on Wednesday morning, so.
He said he'd be happy to. He was.
So moved.
Seconded.
Second.
All in favor?
It was a race for the slugs.
Thank you.
This is to maintain the true slug identity of our
That's right.
So I'll move to adjourn.
All right. Thank you. One more item.
Oh.
Back to the close.
Oh.
No question periods, no more. So back to the close and then,
Just take a little note that